The little blonde aristocrat suddenly being mugged by the black-haired boy, who wields a stick. The mugger demands he leave everything with monetary value. The little boy, standing outside a large building, notes his own amazing unluckiness but then gets distracted, observing that the mugger's stick looks like a tasty sweet called fukashi, which he remembers enjoying last week. A flashback reveals the boy remembers his previous life. Before this, he was a terror, seen yelling at a maid over apples, threatening to turn her into a silkworm, and demanding a perfect apple, which made the maid apologize profusely. He was shown running off laughing. Now 3 years old and the third son of an aristocrat, he recalls his past life as a 17-year-old high school student in Japan. After realizing he's been a naughty brat, he spent 3 days blushing in bed, ashamed of his past behavior. He identifies himself as Fran Dux Triena, living in the Ascalon Empire. He realizes this world is from an RPG called Ascalon Senki, where the Triena family are rivals to the hero. Fran is the youngest, weakest, and so-called villain, who, along with his brothers, is fated to be defeated. This terrible realization fills him with gloom. Fran decides he must stop being a villain, leave the house, and find a peaceful country. He remembers from the game that there's a hidden passage, which he doubts his brothers know about. He finds and opens the passage but is startled by the darkness. The passage is dark and scary, making him gulp nervously, though he knows it might lead to town. Inside, he's confronted by the mugger again, who yells at him. Fran apologizes, thinking internally that the passage was scarier. He recalls his old school was full of delinquents, so he isn't that scared of the mugger. When the mugger again demands valuables, Fran says he only has his clothes and asks if the boy can sell them. The mugger is confused, so Fran just offers his clothes. When the mugger asks what he's doing, Fran explains he can't undress himself, as he's never done it before and it's not like a simple t-shirt. The mugger takes only a single button, asking if it's enough, and says it's for medicine. Fran reflects on the sad reality of poor people not affording medicine. The mugger, thinking nobles are idiots, tells Fran to go home. Fran briefly wonders if his athletic father could help the boy, but doubts it. As Fran leaves, the mugger tells him to be careful and says, "See you later." Fran asks if the boy is always there, and the boy replies, "Sometimes." Fran runs back through the scary, dark passage, crying. He bursts out and is hugged by a maid, who was looking for him. A man named Sir Severin is also present. Fran cries, relieved to be home, thinking his house is the best. Sir Severin, who is Fran's older brother and 7 years his senior, confronts him. He asks where Fran was and what happened to his clothes. Fran just apologizes. When pressed for an explanation, Fran invents a lie, claiming he gave his button to a pigeon because it looked like a bean. He thinks the lie will work, but Severin just looks baffled. Severin patiently explains that pigeons don't eat buttons because they aren't beans. He decides Fran needs to study hard and says he will accompany him. Fran realizes his brother must think he's very stupid. Severin notices Fran is dirty and cleans him with purification magic. Fran thanks him but says he still wants to take a bath before studying, even though the magic already cleaned him. Fran then clarifies he wants to bathe together with Severin, explaining the big bathroom makes him feel lonely. Severin is surprised but agrees, and Fran is excited. In the bathroom, Severin is in the large tub while Fran is in a small wooden one. Severin explains their father, who is at work, said Fran is too small for the big bath and might drown, telling Severin to call him if Fran wanted to enter. Severin then asks Fran if he wants to get in the big tub. Fran excitedly yells, "Eek!" and "I want to go in." He thinks his old, naughty self would have caused a scene and gotten the maid Kitty fired, who is shown looking worried. In the next panel, Severin is cramped in the small tub while Fran happily splashes in the big one. Fran tells his brother, "You can do this," and mentions his shoulders are a bit cold. Severin smiles, finding it fun, and asks how the water is. Fran offers to pour hot water on him. Fran splashes water on Severin, who thanks him. Severin then pours water on Fran. They both laugh, agreeing that bathing together is fun. Severin promises to do something about the bath situation, so Fran only has to wait a little longer. Another flashback shows Fran's past bad behavior at the dinner table. He's seen complaining about a pie, saying it doesn't taste like apples and yelling about not liking the purple stuff, berry pie. Back in the present, Fran is in bed, blushing. He realizes this is the past life effect. He's already learned villainous deeds and says selfish things naturally. Later, Fran is lying on the floor when his eldest brother, Stefan, arrives. Fran is surprised as Stefan is usually busy with the knights. Stefan jokes, asking if Fran is done playing mermaid washed up on the beach. Fran is mortified, wondering if he really did that. Fran explains he was pondering his existence and his bad luck at being reborn as the weakest. Stefan misunderstands, praising him for studying philosophy. He then mentions he already ate 2 apple pies and Fran's portion will be smaller. As Stefan reaches for the pie, asking if he should have a bite, Fran shouts, "Wait!" He internally admits the pie is delicious and he can't help but eat it, even after being selfish. Just then, a chef dashes in with a new pie, greeting Sir Stefan. The chef confirms this apple pie has no cinnamon, the brown stuff. Fran gets very excited, urging the chef to cut it and declaring this apple pie the most delicious and the best, while Stefan watches calmly. As Fran is about to eat, he stops. He looks at the remaining pie and the hopeful staff, wondering if this moment is the dividing line between being a villain or not. Fran then announces that everyone else can eat the leftovers. The staff are overjoyed and thank him. Stefan pats Fran's head, calling him a good boy who has learned kindness. Fran resolves to become a good child. Stefan looks relieved and says he'll help Fran be a good boy. He comments that Fran has changed and is growing up well. He also reveals he came specifically to see Fran. Fran is shocked, thinking about how these kind brothers will later call him the weakest. Ignoring the serious moment, Fran suddenly runs off, yelling for Brother Severin to take a bath with him. Stefan watches him go, musing that they haven't interacted like this since their mother passed away. With that, Fran's story of escaping his villainous fate begins, and the chapter ends. Fran reflects on his fated role as the first boss in the game Ascalon Senki, who is known as a troublesome foe that combines swordsmanship with abnormal magic. Fran, however, privately dismisses this, believing his attack power is actually weak, his special magic is easily countered by medicine, and his sword only sparkles because it is covered in gems. He begins his studies with a new tutor, an elite 26-year-old magician named Arnika. Fran excitedly asks if his magic will be impressive, like spewing fire and ice, but Arnika, while reading her book, seriously tells him she does not think so. When Fran tries to cast a spell, his magic is revealed to be a small, dull puff of smoke that disappears after only 2 seconds. Arnika, who Fran notes entered the magic agency at a young age, simply tells him to practice again. Fran is disappointed, wishing she would show some consideration or santaku for his feelings as a nobleman. The lesson continues in a repetitive loop, with Fran trying to cast magic and producing small puffs, while the expressionless Arnika only says, "Again." Fran becomes increasingly scared by the pressure and finally cries out. At the end of the lesson, Arnika simply closes her book and thanks him for the day. Fran is shocked that she is leaving and feels distraught, as he was waiting to be comforted and internally calls her a psychopath. He clenches his fists, worrying that this kind of treatment is bad and will be the reason he becomes a selfish aristocrat. He falls to the ground in gloom, but Arnika's hand just appears as she excuses herself. After the teacher leaves, the maid Kitty, who Fran notes is a strong former knight, carries him away. She tells him that if he does not like the teacher, he can just have her dismissed. Fran thinks about his previous 3 teachers. The first one was scary, the second cried because he failed to use the fire magic he claimed he could use, and the third did nothing and let Fran do whatever he wanted. In his room, Fran decides that it is okay and he will work hard. He reminds himself that he has a goal to be a good boy and not become a villain. At the next lesson, Arnika tells him to focus on basic magic training, but Fran, thinking of her as a demon teacher, is different today. After he tries his magic, he immediately demands praise, explaining that it will motivate him. Arnika is confused and just tells him to try again. This makes Fran angry, and he yells at her, asking if she is stupid for not knowing that people do their best when they are praised. Arnika calmly replies that nothing will change, which Fran declares is something a stupid person would say. He points out that she has not even tried praising him, which leaves Arnika wondering if Fran is calling her stupid. Fran smiles brightly and clenches his fists, asking, "Right?" Arnika hesitates but finally agrees to try, awkwardly saying, "Well done." As Fran continues to practice, producing small puffs, she repeats, "Well done." Fran is overjoyed and eagerly wants to show her again. He gets so motivated that he tries again, but this time nothing comes out. Panicking that his motivation is breaking, he yells at Arnika to praise him with all her best, right now. This startles Arnika into shouting, "Wow! Master Fran is so good." As expected, and the motivated Fran-sama is cool. This burst of praise works, and Fran successfully summons a gust of wind magic. He is thrilled and tells Arnika it is thanks to her support, but she calmly corrects him, saying it was the result of his own hard work and gives him a perfect score. Fran then apologizes for calling her stupid. Arnika smiles, admitting that it is as he said and that she was ignorant of the amazing power of words. Fran blushes, feeling embarrassed because he should be an adult with his past life memories. He asks if they can make up, and she happily agrees, with both deciding to continue doing their best. Later, Fran is once again crying as he runs through the dark hidden passage. He complains about how dark it is, wondering why they do not have motion sensor lights in a world that has light magic. He finally arrives at the exit and cheerfully spots the mugger boy, yelling, "Mugger-kun," and "Long time NOC." The boy, who is sitting on some ruins, tells Fran to stop calling him that. He says Fran is not cautious and that the name is rude. He then holds out Fran's button and says he will return it, leaving Fran confused. The boy holds 3 buttons in his hand and explains that the button must have been really expensive. He says he only sold one because the local bosses changed, which made the medicines cheaper, so the person is okay. He comically tries to describe the button, saying it's from a shell on a gon's horn, before admitting he doesn't really know. Fran is suddenly horrified, asking if the person who needed medicine did not make it. The boy just ruffles Fran's hair and laughs, saying Fran is easy to tease. The boy again notes Fran is not cautious and says he could attack him for more money. Fran asks if he feels like mugging him now, but the boy shouts, "I will not." He explains that he is indebted to Fran and was saved by him, promising to pay him back someday. When Fran calls him Mugger-kun again, the boy gets annoyed and finally introduces himself as Tries. Fran is delighted and introduces himself as Fran. He then pulls jewels from his pocket, explaining his proper measure is to throw them so he can run away while people swarm them. Fran proudly calls this a genius idea that his friends taught him in his previous life. Tries immediately tells him that is a bad idea and that carrying and showing jewels like that will only get him targeted more. He then offers to go with Fran if he is going somewhere dangerous. Fran gets excited and asks if Tries will show him around town, offering to leave the jewels. He wants to go to a delicious sweets shop to buy and eat lots of cookies. Tries to calm him down, while Fran celebrates, thinking this is super lucky and a step toward escaping the country. Tries stops him, explaining he cannot go into town wearing his noble clothes. He says people will know Fran is a noble and take him away, taking everything he has. He adds that because Fran is quite cute, he would probably be sold. When Fran asks what they would take, Tries clarifies they would take his body. Fran is horrified, realizing that being kidnapped and sold is not just a story from another country but happens here too. He compares this fate to being killed by the hero. Seeing Fran is now terrified and gloomy, Tries apologizes for scaring him, though he insists it is the truth, and suggests Fran go home for today. Fran, feeling lightheaded and sick, is distraught at the thought of going back through the scary passage alone and asks Mugger-kun to hug him tight. Tries is surprised but gives Fran a hug and awkwardly pats his back, thinking to himself that he used to do this for his younger brothers. After a moment, Fran feels better and says he can go home now. He thanks Tries and tells him not to forget his promise, which Tries agrees to. Fran then runs back into the passage, still crying that it is so dark and scary. The chapter ends by stating his plan to run away is steadily moving forward. Fran searching frantically through the grass, and he triumphantly pops up after finding a decorated egg. He had just been talking to his maid, Kitty, explaining that the special egg his brother Severin decorated had not yet been found. Feeling he must find it as soon as possible, he thanked Kitty for her good wishes and ran off to search. Now 6 years old, Fran is in a very good mood as he hunts. He reflects that even though he has his past life memories, he still genuinely enjoys the egg hunt. He thinks the person who invented this game is a genius, especially when he finds an egg with a cool picture. He glances around the garden path, newly determined to find Severin's egg because he feels that he and his brother have been growing closer lately. He peeks under the roots of a large tree and excitedly spots the egg. He pauses, glancing at Kitty and another maid in the distance, and worries that he might get his clothes dirty. He crawls under the tree and discovers the egg is covered in a strange, dark, hazy mist. He bats at the cheeky mist with his hand. The mist finally disappears, leaving Fran with his heart pounding fast. He wonders if it was a good thing that he erased it, but he is startled when Kitty calls his name. Kitty approaches, explaining she saw him and thought he might need help. Fran, holding the egg, tries to dismiss her concern but gets stuck while trying to crawl out backwards. He panics, yelling that it is scary and begs Kitty to pull him out, as his hands are full holding the egg. While stuck, he admires the egg, feeling he can sense his brother's style in it and confirming it must be Severin's. Kitty pulls Fran free and he cries out about how scary that was. She tells him it's almost time for lunch and that they should go change his clothes. Fran holds up the blue egg and asks for her opinion. Kitty agrees it is a very classy work of art, which makes Fran cheer. He exclaims that his brother Severin is cool, kind, handsome, and smart. They run into Severin on their way to the dining room. Fran, excited, asks if Severin is also going to lunch and if they can walk together. He proudly shows Severin the egg, explaining he knew it was his brother's the moment he found it and that he plans to have it dried and displayed in his room. Severin smiles and congratulates him. Severin then smiles warmly at Fran and says that for the next egg hunt, he would like to find an egg that Fran has drawn on. Fran is overjoyed by this request and eagerly shouts, yes, deciding he will draw on the eggs tomorrow. This happy thought continues as he sits down for a meal, but his mood is interrupted. Prince Raphael, who is a year older than Fran, has come for a visit. Fran is not happy about this because he remembers from the game that Raphael will one day join the hero, fight the Empire, and beat Fran up. He thinks about how the prince will grow up to be a bulky warrior with a big shield that will block all of Fran's attacks. Prince Raphael looks sad and asks Fran to tell him a happy story. Fran is annoyed by the strange request but knows he cannot refuse a prince. Thinking of happy things, Fran decides to tell him about the bubble bath he recently took with Severin. He describes how fun it was with so many bubbles and how it made his skin smooth and soft. He even mentions he told Severin he was cute. The prince, showing no reaction, simply asks if Fran enjoyed it. Fran, baffled, confirms it was super fun and made him very happy. He then suggests that Raphael should try it too, saying it would be fun to take a bath with his own older brother, Crown Prince Lionelus. Fran knows that Prince Lionelus, the future emperor, is good friends with his own brother, Stefan. This suggestion makes the situation very awkward. Prince Raphael asks how one even invites their brother to a bath. Fran, confused, asks if he cannot just ask him normally. The prince sadly says no, admitting that he has not spoken to his brother in over a year and that his brother will not speak to him. When Fran asks why, the prince reveals that his mother told him his big brother hates him. Fran is shocked, recognizing this as the kind of political drama he used to see in historical shows in his past life. He tells the prince that his mother must be wrong and that a big brother would never do that, so he should just try talking to him. The prince is inspired by this and resolves to talk to his brother, even if he gets hated, because he loves him. Fran enthusiastically agrees, saying he loves his brothers too and that it makes him happy when Severin pats his head. The prince worries he will be laughed at for saying, "I love you," but Fran insists he needs to say it, as this could be his chance. The prince decides that just talking to his brother will be enough, even if he does not get his head patted. A nearby chef cheers the prince on with a pun about shoe, pastry, and you. The prince smiles brightly and tells Fran that if he gets laughed at, he will come back so Fran can tell him more happy stories. As the prince leaves, his attendants praise his feelings. Fran is stunned, realizing that no one noticed he was the one who gave the advice and wonders if he has just become a mess cleaner for the royal family. Just as he is despairing, his eldest brother, Stefan, appears and calls his name. Stefan walks up to Fran, looking very proud. He praises Fran, calling him a good boy. He explains that he heard Fran was the one who advised Prince Raphael, and as a result, the two princes have improved their relationship. This has pleased the Empress and, as Stefan puts it, averted a national crisis. Fran is a little confused by the national crisis part but is thrilled to be praised by Stefan. Beaming with happiness, Fran asks Stefan if it is his rest day and if he will play with him. Stefan agrees. But before they can, Fran, remembering his own advice to the prince, stops and shouts, "I love you, brother." Stefan is startled for a moment but then breaks into a laugh, commenting on Fran's great facial expression. He playfully chases Fran and catches him in his arms. Stefan then holds Fran and tells him that he loves him too. Overcome with emotion, Fran bursts into happy tears and immediately asks his brother to say it again. Fran happily playing in his family's large garden, which has a hill he loves sliding down. He shouts, "Hi Ia," as he slides, telling his maid Kitty that he loves it and wants to go again. He is excitedly waiting for his brother Severin, who Kitty assures him is on his way. Fran is all set and ready because he is going on a picnic with Severin today. Severin soon arrives, apologizing for the wait and bringing a basket. He has also brought a special tea that he personally likes and wants Fran to try. At the picnic, Fran is delighted to see the food is full of his favorite things, noting it looks even prettier than usual. Severin explains the chef worked very hard. Fran excitedly tells Kitty that Severin gave him tea and then beams as he declares he loves apple pie and he loves brother Severin, to which Severin replies that he loves Fran too. When Fran sips the tea, he is amazed by its mysterious and delicious chocolate-like flavor and aftertaste. He exclaims that chocolate is very precious, so he rarely gets to eat it. Fran declares that his brother is amazing and knows everything, but Severin modestly replies that he found the tea at the place where he is studying as a knight's apprentice. This reminds Fran that both Severin and Stefan have been going out to study knighthood this year. He feels sad they won't be home as often but clenches his fists, deciding he must support them. He asks Severin to please tell him when he stays out overnight so he can mentally prepare himself, which he explains means he will try to get tired so he can fall asleep right away. Touched, Severin pats Fran's head and promises to tell him. Severin then gives Fran a ribbon, explaining he has cast a spell on it to give Fran good dreams. He suggests tying it to a stuffed animal, noting the spell will last about 2 weeks. Fran is amazed, exclaiming, "Wow," and thanking his cool brother. That night, Fran ties the ribbon, which he thinks is cool, to the tail of his large stuffed wolf. He snuggles in bed with it, telling the wolf to show him a nice dream. He notes that he wants to try the ribbon even though everyone is home. He dreams that he has suddenly grown very tall. In this dream, Severin and Stefan are there, with Severin noting his height and Stefan exclaiming that Fran is even taller than him. Dream Fran proudly declares he will protect his brothers. Just then, a hero appears, calling Fran an evil aristocrat, and vowing to restore peace to the world. But Fran's family and friends appear to defend him. Severin shouts, Fran says he hates it, and Stefan yells, "Don't bully my brother." Even Mangarecap shows up, shouting that he's amazing. His father encourages him not to cry, and his teacher Arnika identifies his new form as self-boosting magic. The whole group cheers for him to do his best. Fran wakes up with a start, clenching his fists in excitement. He cheers, "That was a great dream," feeling motivated and deciding he must thank Severin. He goes outside, carrying his wolf, and finds Stefan and Severin sparring with swords. He watches, thinking it's like a drama, but also realizing he would die if he got hit with such force. He runs up, greeting them both, and immediately thanks Severin, exclaiming, "I had a nice dream." He excitedly recounts the dream where he became Don, and his brothers protected him from the EY hero. Severin is pleased, and Stefan asks if Severin gave Fran a present. Severin confirms he gave Fran the ribbon for sweet dreams while they are away. Stefan then tells Fran that his own magic is rarely seen and that he has cast a great spell for his cute little brother. He gives Fran a button, calling it a talisman that will protect him from bad things. Fran is ecstatic as the button's color changes, shouting, "Rare button." So happy. Stefan then turns to Severin and hands him a matching talisman, saying, "You are also my cute little brother." This causes Severin to blush and stammer, while Fran excitedly points out that they now match. Later, Fran is playing in the garden with Kitty, happy that he doesn't have to study because his brothers aren't home. He's learned that Kitty made his button into a brooch, while Severin made his into a ring. He runs over to the gardener, an old man he calls Grandpa, who laughs and lifts Fran onto his shoulders. Fran asks what Grandpa was doing and the gardener explains he was caring for a tree that wasn't doing well, pointing it out. As Fran looks, he sees the same mysterious dark mist that was on the egg. He approaches the tree and places his hands on it. The gardener and Kitty watch from a distance, commenting on how kind the young master is. The mist vanishes, and the gardener, noting it's almost noon, carries Fran back to the mansion on his shoulders. Fran feels tall, like a giant robot, and thinks about how he wants to grow up big. The chapter ends with a shot of the mysterious mist, now inside the castle. Fran, who is pouting with very puffed-up cheeks. His teacher, Hartman-sensei, leans in with a friendly smile and asks why his cute student has such a face today. The sensei, a 28-year-old who teaches many languages, then bursts into laughter, asking if Fran is really that upset about the ban. Hartman-sensei soon understands that Fran is just very sad, as Fran sits holding his face dejectedly while thinking about how cool his brother Severin is when he dances. Fran remembers how his brother had asked if he wanted to peek inside, and Fran got excited, but Severin then had to explain that even though he let him in, the area was forbidden today. The reason is that Brother Severin is hosting a tea party in the salon and garden for his friends, and the children were asked to be considerate and stay away. Fran is heartbroken because he couldn't even say good morning to his brother. The sensei reflects on how Fran had waited so patiently through the lesson, not moving or making a sound so as not to be a disturbance. To cheer him up, Hartman-sensei smiles brightly, noting the sad atmosphere is all gone, and transitions to a language question, asking Fran how to say lonely in the kingdom language. Fran guesses, Datsa, Zaminji, but the sensei cheerfully shouts, no, and provides the correct answer, einsam, which sounds like a German word. Fran thinks to himself that he never disliked his sensei, who always praised him, even back when Fran was a bad kid who skipped class without permission. Fran then looks up with determination while his sensei watches him thoughtfully. Fran thinks about how sad he is because he and his brother used to be very close. He knows his brother has been practicing a lot and he doesn't want to bother him, but he internally pleads for no one to take his brother away. The sensei wonders if Fran is crying and if the situation is really that painful. With a kind smile, Hartman-sensei turns and announces he will show Fran a special method. He explains that when you are separated from someone you love, thinking about them a lot will help you feel less lonely. Fran looks down, saying that when he thinks about his brother, he just feels even sadder. The sensei then suggests that after thinking so much about Severin-sama, Fran should make a bouquet for him and carefully pick out the flowers. Fran's spirits lift immediately at the idea of picking flowers, and he excitedly agrees. In the garden, the sensei asks Fran to think about his image of Severin-sama, focusing on his scent and color. Fran thinks hard and decides his brother's color is green. He then spots some white, bell-shaped flowers and picks them, followed by some large white carnations. The sensei praises his good choices, and Fran holds the finished bouquet, beaming with pride and exclaiming that he did it. Fran then holds up a small bouquet and presents it to his sensei, thanking him for the day. He explains that this bouquet is based on his image of the sensei. Hartman is surprised but calls it a nice idea. Fran smiles, saying today's lesson was about love and that he completely forgot about being lonely. He now wants to make bouquets for his other brother, Stefan, and his father too. Looking up at his teacher, Fran apologizes for skipping classes without permission in the past and promises to attend properly from now on, admitting that he likes his sensei. Hartman-sensei is completely overcome with emotion and bursts into tears, crying out, grazie, which means, thank you. He clarifies that he is crying because he is just so glad that Fran-sama has opened up to him, as he used to worry that Fran disliked his lessons. Fran just stares, stunned by this display. He thinks to himself that he had no idea his sensei was such a sentimental person. The scene changes, and Fran is now wearing a hood. He explains that Treiskuen gave him these clothes so they could go explore the city together. They arrive in a rough part of town where a fight is breaking out between commoners and people from the slums. One man yells that his product is useless now, and another man yells back at him after insulting his crappy herb. Another confrontation starts when one man accuses another of bumping his shoulder. A man's herbs are knocked to the ground, and he shouts that they are dirty, while Treiskuen tries to get them to stop. Fran, in his hood, hides behind a barrel as the fight escalates with punches being thrown. Two of the men notice Treiskuen and aggressively tell the shitty brat to get lost. Treiskuen is caught in the middle of the brawl, trying to mediate, while the men taunt him for being slow and not strong enough. From his hiding spot, Fran worries and wonders if he should use his magic to help, noticing that Treiskuen's cheek is hurt. Suddenly, someone shouts that the police are coming. The brawlers curse and quickly run away. Treiskuen is left standing alone, looking relieved, and Fran starts to call out to him. Fran peeks out from behind the wall, but Treiskuen spots him and tells him not to come out. Fran expresses concern for his injured cheek, but Treiskuen, holding his face, insists he is fine. He then looks past Fran and thanks someone else, saying he's all right and that they must have been scared during the fight too. A young girl with long hair appears, and Fran peeks out from behind Treiskuen to look at her. Fran immediately recognizes her as the main heroine and the healer from the hero's party, his future enemy. He thinks about how she's the same age as Treiskuen now but will awaken as the Saintess at age 15 and, despite being a healer, uses magic blocking spells. The girl looks at Treiskuen with concern, noting that he's been struck in the face, and offers him some medicinal herbs she has. Treiskuen, looking flustered, insists it's no big deal and tells her to put the herbs away, while Fran watches in shock. Fran clenches his fist, apologizing internally to Treiskuen because he knows he can't help him in this situation. Treiskuen looks at the herbs that were scattered on the ground, noting they are badly damaged. Fran asks if water will help them recover, but the girl sadly explains that since they have been purified, it's impossible. Fran then holds out a container, offering some shaved ice, and calls out to Trise-kun using the name Frappe to protect his real identity. Trise-kun takes it and thanks him. The girl is suddenly overcome with emotion, clasping her hands and saying she is very moved. She praises Fran's kind heart for showing compassion even to plants, saying her own heart is filled with beautiful emotions. She thanks God for this encounter and then invites Trise-kun to come to her place. Sensing this is not a good idea, Trise-kun grabs Fran's hand and announces they are making a break for it. They run off, with Trise-kun apologizing and explaining Fran is an important relative, as the girl wishes them well. As they flee, Fran looks back and senses a powerful surge of magical energy. He sees the girl praying with her eyes closed, glowing with power. This confirms Fran's suspicion, she is the saintess. Back in a safe room, Fran changes out of the hood and back into his noble clothes. Trise-kun asks if Fran knows his name, and Fran, looking annoyed, insists that he does. Trise-kun then explains that he can't call Fran by his real name in public because of noble rules. This upsets Fran, who asks why Trise-kun won't just call him by his name, Fran. Fran puts his hands on his head in frustration, complaining that Trise-kun always says no. He insists that he wants to be called by his name and that even a nickname would be fine. He then makes a specific request. When they say goodbye, Trise-kun must say, "See you, Fran." Trise-kun, looking exasperated, just pats Fran on the head and tells him to go home, though he does quietly say the name Fran. As Trise-kun turns to leave, Fran says, "See you, Trise-kun." Then, blushing, Fran suddenly yells out, "Say it." Trise-kun stops, looks back over his shoulder with a small smile, and finally says, "Yeah. See you later, Fran." Fran is absolutely overjoyed, celebrating the happiness of them finally calling each other's names. He jumps in the air, shouting that they are friends now, and waves happily from the window, calling out, "See you again, Trise-kun." Fran wakes up in his bed with a sly look on his face, feeling proud of himself. He thinks that thanks to his previous life, he's much smarter than other kids and that sneaking out of the mansion to secretly observe his brother Severin's second tea party will be a piece of cake. He decides to do this despite recalling his father's stern warning that, starting from yesterday, no one was to be allowed beyond the front door. Fran successfully sneaks out and hides, looking down on the party from a balcony where a teacup rests on a saucer. He watches as 3 enchanted young ladies gather around his brother Severin, calling the garden lovely, expressing how impressed they are, and asking Severin-sama to come over to them. As Fran observes this, he starts to worry if his big brother is okay and wonders if this is turning into some kind of romantic competition. Peeking from his hiding spot, Fran notes to himself that his brother Severin-sama is quite popular. He watches as Severin, looking charming, jokes with another male guest, asking if he got all the attention this time. This guest, identified as Burkhard, simply looks away and scoffs, leading Severin to ask him if he enjoyed the food. Fran is a bit overwhelmed, thinking his brother's beauty is the cause of all this and finding the situation a little scary. Still hidden in the leafy bushes, Fran listens intently as the ladies at the table start asking about him. One asks Severin if he has a brother, and another quickly specifies if he means Lord Fran, who has been mentioned so frequently in his stories. The ladies all lean in, eagerly asking him to please tell them more. Severin smiles and confirms that his brother Fran is very cute. He then gestures to the food, mentioning that while all the dishes are wonderful and made with heart by the head chef, the apple pie is exquisite, noting that it's his little brother's favorite. Severin, looking pleased, continues telling stories about Fran, recounting a recent picnic. He explains how Fran worked so hard to prepare lunch and very sincerely spread out the picnic cloth, but then promptly fell sound asleep. He also adds that Fran has recently enjoyed playing on the hill. Meanwhile, Fran, still hiding and lying on his stomach in the bushes, pouts with a red face. He thinks it looks like everyone is having fun and feels left out, wishing he could join the conversation too. Fran's hiding spot is compromised as a voice suddenly says, "Huh, you seem surprised." Fran is shocked and turns to see the guest Burkhard standing right behind him. Burkhard smiles and whispers that he understands but advises Fran to please be quiet, or Lord Severin will find him. Burkhard leans in, covering his mouth as he observes Fran, and remarks that now that he looks closely, Fran does resemble Lord Severin. He then asks Fran directly what he is doing there. Fran, looking a bit flustered, admits he also wanted to talk to Lord Severin, but he moved away quietly when the ladies arrived. Burkhard praises him, saying that a good child knows how to endure such things, even when they want to talk to their brother. This makes Fran happy, and he instantly decides he likes this man, thinking he's a good person. Burkhardt then confirms his suspicion, asking if he is indeed Lord Fran. When Burkhardt asks why he's there, Fran first says he came because he was sad about Brother Severin not being available. Burkhardt just smiles and says, "I see," then asks if that's the real reason. Fran immediately blurts out the truth. He came to see the Saintess. This delights Burkhardt, who strikes a dramatic pose, saying he feels a sense of familiarity with Fran, like a kindred spirit. He introduces himself as Burkhardt of the Trishula Dukedom, saying it's nice to meet Fran, and then points toward the party, indicating that the girl designated by the country as the Saintess is over there. Fran peers out and sees the girl from the city, who is clasping her hands and expressing how impressed she is by how beautiful and healthy the flowers are blooming. Fran instantly recognizes her, thinking there's no doubt it's the child he met before. He realizes with a shock that she was chosen as the Saintess much faster than the game's original plot intended. He wonders if this means fate is changing for the better or if she is somehow cheating. As he's processing this, Burkhardt advises Frankuin that it's probably best for him to return to his room now. Burkhardt suddenly appears right next to Fran, making him jump in surprise. Fran thinks to himself that the man moves just like a ninja. Burkhardt calls him a good boy and tells him to remember that he isn't alone and can always turn to others for help. He then adds with a smile that he has to say, Fran's homemade apple pie is great. The scene shifts, and Fran is now with his magic teacher, who has long dark hair. The teacher asks Fran if he wants to learn a magic spell to brighten things up. Fran gets very excited, throwing his arms wide and saying he wants to do something like light magic. His private motivation is that if the dark secret passage were brighter, he could get outside more easily. He justifies this to himself as being a nobleman who spares no effort for a better future, which involves him continuing to explore the city. His teacher, however, just looks down silently and says, Fran-sama, and Fran immediately recognizes this as a bad reaction. Just then, a maid appears to inform the young master and the teacher that tea is ready. Fran tugs on his teacher's sleeve, suggesting they have some tea and telling her to take her time thinking about it. The teacher then delivers the bad news, which Fran recognizes was the same in the game. The teacher says she knows she's being harsh, but Fran-sama cannot use the light attribute. The reason is that he simply doesn't have the aptitude for it, as only heroes and magicians are able to use all types of magic. The teacher explains that if it is urgent, the only other way to get light is to use a magic item, such as a light stone. Fran immediately has an idea, thinking he'll take them from his room's lamp. He then cries out in frustration, realizing that's no good because then his own room will become dark. Seeing his distress, the teacher gently takes Fran's hands and tells him he must not give up, explaining that life is full of surprising encounters. Fran asks if this is about his sensei, and she confirms it is. She explains, for example, that she was like a person who was only interested in magic and couldn't get along with anyone. She admits that if she had never met Fran, she probably would have quit the magic agency and become a recluse. But thanks to him, she got to know a good person and finally learned the joy of interacting with people. She encourages him by saying that if you don't give up, even magic itself can change. Fran is stunned by this, asking, "Is that so?" His teacher explains that while there is no precedent for it, that doesn't mean it is impossible. Fran's eyes light up, and he exclaims, "Science." The teacher smiles kindly at him, saying she knows Fran can do it if he tries, and they should do their best together. Fran cheers, "Yeah," and then happily invites his teacher to have lunch, which she accepts. While they are having lunch, Fran asks his teacher if there is any food she dislikes. The teacher pauses, fork in hand, and looks at her plate, eventually answering no. She elaborates that she doesn't really know, as she has always just thought of food as a way to fill her stomach and has never considered having likes or dislikes. Fran is surprised to hear this and shares that, for him, he dislikes monster meat. He points to a dish on the table, saying it smells like a wild animal. The teacher takes a bite of the food Fran pointed out and chews it thoughtfully. She then replies that she sees what he means, as it certainly has a wild taste, but she finds it very delicious. Encouraged, Fran points to another dish, recommending it and adding that he also likes fruit. He smiles brightly asking, "Really? It's delicious," and boasts that it's because their chef is excellent at cooking. The teacher suddenly stops moving, causing Fran to lean forward in concern and ask, "Teacher? Did you hate it?" The teacher looks at Fran with a soft, emotional expression, explaining that she has never had the experience of sharing a meal with someone like this before. Because of that, she says, it was fun. Fran, who thinks about how he usually feels lonely when his teacher leaves after their studies, is overjoyed. He smiles and exclaims, "I'm having fun too," which makes him happy. The teacher smiles back at Fran-sama and replies that she is also very happy and had fun too. This happy exchange leads to a new arrangement, with Fran asking his teacher to please join him for lunch every time they finish studying. The teacher replies, "Yes, of course. I'd be honored," and Fran cheers, "Yay." Sometime later, while Fran is resting his head on the table, he asks his teacher if she isn't going to take a break. He explains that next week, he's going to the capital with Brother Severin and the others, and he thinks Brother Stefan might come along as well. The teacher, however, says no. When Fran asks why, she clarifies that she isn't planning to leave, so her schedule will be the usual. Peeking from behind his chair, Fran asks if it's because of work, and she confirms, yes. Fran gets an idea and cheerfully tells his teacher that he will bring her a souvenir from the capital. The teacher is confused by the word, and Fran is surprised she doesn't know what it is. He explains that it's a gift, maybe something handmade, that you bring back from a place you're visiting. He promises to give it to her after he returns, since he doesn't know where her house is. He then asks what his teacher would like to receive. The teacher thinks for a moment, wondering about cicada shells, as she recalls how she collects them in the yard only for them to mysteriously disappear from her room in the autumn. Fran, not hearing this, asks if the teacher will like the same things he likes, but she flatly says, no. The teacher's mood suddenly changes, and she looks away with a sad expression. Fran notices and asks, "Sensei?" She apologizes, explaining that when she thought about not being able to see Fran-sama for a while, she suddenly felt like there was a hole in her heart and she started to feel lonely, too. She realizes that this feeling is loneliness. She then looks at Fran and asks him to please not forget her while he is gone. Fran's face brightens, and he quickly reassures her with a yes. He promises that he will think about her a lot while he's away, so there's no way he could forget her. This makes the teacher smile and laugh softly. She then tells him that she will also look for a souvenir for Fran-sama while she is in the imperial capital. Fran gets even more excited at this idea and suggests they have a souvenir party when he gets back, and his teacher happily agrees. Filled with determination, Fran looks out the window, pumps his fist, and declares, "Sensei, I'm going to catch a big bug for you." He thinks to himself that summer is almost here, which is the perfect time for it. This declaration leaves his teacher sitting in stunned silence, surrounded by question marks, as she wonders to herself if a bug is really something she would be happy to receive. Kitty carrying Fran in a very awkward way, tucked under one arm while marching forward, though they insist they have a firm hold and have gotten the hang of it. They have arrived at a distant villa after traveling all night by carriage, a journey that was quite far. That night, Fran is tucked into a large bed, and his older brother Severin watches over him. As Fran falls asleep under the light of the moon, he murmurs, "Night, Brother Severin." And Severin wishes him a good night before leaving the room. The next morning, Fran wakes with a big yawn and stretch, noting the winter chill in the air from his window. A maid enters to wish him good morning and help him get dressed. Fran is soon shown beaming in a new, warm cloak with a smart-looking plaid bow, thinking to himself how cool it is. Ready for the day, Fran is excited to explore the forest around the villa with Brother Severin. As they walk, Fran points up at a large tree and asks his brother about it. Severin explains that it is a fairy tree, said to be home to fairies and characterized by a 7-colored glow. Fran is immediately amazed and then spots some star-shaped flowers on the ground, asking what they are. Severin identifies them as star-tail, explaining that crushing the flower turns it into a shining powder, a fact which intrigues Fran. Fran looks at the fairy tree again and is deeply impressed, thinking his brother knows everything, just like a wiki, and is so smart and amazing. Severin, however, looks at the tree with a thoughtful, puzzled expression, even reaching out to touch its dark bark. He notes that while the pattern is definitely that of a fairy tree, he has never seen one with such a dark, blackish color before, and he wonders why it looks that way despite having the 7-colored glow. Suddenly, the tree's color seems to change as a dark mist swirls around its top. Fran looks up in confusion, and Severin immediately pulls him back toward a maid, telling him to stay away and asking if he's okay. Severin observes the tree, which is now emitting a dark aura, and concludes that it looks like it was cursed. He explains to Fran that this can happen sometimes, as curses can attach themselves to plants and living things. Fran, wide-eyed with alarm, panics and immediately asks if Severin is cursed and if he's okay. Severin calms his little brother down by gently patting his head. Severin reassures Fran that he is fine, explaining that it seems to be a weak curse and that Brother Stefan's charm worked to protect him. He tells Fran that as long as he wears his own brooch, which is the same as Severin's, he will be fine too. Due to the danger, Severin decides they should stop exploring the forest for now. Fran is impressed by his other brother's protective magic, exclaiming that Brother Stefan is amazing, but he is also visibly disappointed, sadly agreeing as his hope for a fun day playing with Severin is dashed. Later, Severin asks Fran what he's going to do in the afternoon, explaining that he needs to study and practice swordsmanship, so Fran will have to play alone. Fran, looking dejected at first, suddenly gets a bright idea and perks up. He exclaims that he knows he'll take a bath, thinking it will be cool and refreshing. Severin simply looks at him and says his name, and when Fran replies, yes, his brother informs him that there is no bath in this villa. Fran is utterly shocked by this news, and Severin has to remind him that they used the lake last year. Fran is devastated, sitting in the hallway and thinking about how he just wants a bath. He also recalls having a strange dream about a fairy who thanked him for something and offered to grant a wish. Just then, Severin finds him and asks if he's scared of going to the lake. Fran admits that he is, so Severin kindly offers to go with him. At the lake, Fran immediately starts panicking, screaming that he's scared, he can't breathe, and his nose hurts. Severin, who is calmly holding his hand, explains that water is getting in his nose because he's trying to breathe, and he has to remind him that you can't breathe underwater. While being held by Severin in the water, Fran squeezes his eyes shut, thinking that he thought he could float in his previous life, but he is definitely sinking now. Severin asks if he remembers last year, when he also couldn't float and cried, ending up sulking on the lakeside like a washed-up mermaid. Fran doesn't remember this at all and thought he just had a shower. He's shocked that he can't swim. As Severin carries him out of the water, Fran asks if practice will help him learn. Severin suggests that Brother Stefan, who is good at water magic, might be able to help. As they walk back, Severin apologizes to Fran, saying he couldn't help him and even put him in danger. Fran, wrapped in a towel, quickly protests, insisting that he was only brave enough to get in the water because Severin was there with him. This comforts Severin, who smiles and thanks him. Later, Fran is sitting outside in his cloak, sipping iced tea while his brother gets changed. A maid also brings him picture books. The maids praise Fran for a story he told about a king defeating a demon king, calling it a wonderful story that sounded like a song of God. Fran, blushing, says he's embarrassed. He then pauses, noticing his iced tea is warm, despite having ice in it. The maid, Kitty, notices his hesitation and asks if something is wrong, even offering to remake the drink when she worries it's hot. She brings him a new glass, but Fran sips it and finds it's warm too. Just then, Severin returns and asks Fran what's wrong. Fran looks at his brother and the worried maid and decides to say nothing, thinking he'll look like a villain if he complains. Severin, however, picks up Fran's glass and takes a sip, exclaiming in surprise that the drink is cold. He then warns Fran to be careful not to get a cold stomach. Fran is now very confused, realizing that someone must have been considerately keeping him warm, and he's glad he didn't get angry. That night, the maid apologizes for a cloth she brought, but Fran is holding a different, warm towel to his cheek, saying it feels good. The maid is confused as to why the cloth is warm. Fran, feeling sleepy, asks to go to sleep. He dreams of the fairy again, who looks exhausted and explains that it didn't have enough mana to make a bath. The fairy says it did its best by warming his tea and the cloth, but that was its limit. After declaring its debt paid, the fairy vanishes. Fran wakes up, realizing the fairy was real, and shouts, "Thank you very much, Fairy-san," into his empty room. The next morning, the maid apologizes for the cloth not being cold. Fran, now using a proper cold cloth, reassures her it's okay, explaining he thinks it was the fairy's doing. The maid is surprised, remarking that fairies are very rare and not seen much in the capital. Fran looks around, noting the fairy is already gone. The maid then shares exciting news. Stefan-sama will be coming to the villa next week. Fran is overjoyed, shouting that it's amazing, especially since Severin had said Stefan wasn't sure if he could come. He immediately wants to tell Severin. He runs to his brother and thanks him. Severin chuckles, admitting words travel fast, and that he wrote a letter to Stefan saying Fran wanted to see him. He teases Fran, betting he wants to practice swimming. He also adds that he has other things to discuss with their brother. The story ends with a shot of Stefan in a carriage, reading Severin's letter as he travels toward them. Fran is excited to see his brother Stefan finally arrive at the villa after a week. He runs to greet him, and the maid Kitty also welcomes him, noting he must be worn out from his long journey. Stefan thanks them for the greeting and asks if anything has changed while he was gone. Stefan immediately begins to discuss the situation with Severin, confirming what he heard and stating he will start his investigation right away. He praises Severin for his good judgment and handling of the matter, and he gives him a reassuring pat on the head. This praise makes Severin blush. While the two older brothers talk, Fran affectionately rubs his face against Severin's side, prompting Severin to look down and wonder what he is doing. Fran continues to affectionately nuzzle his brother Severin, who becomes very embarrassed. Fran explains that he is just following Severin's own advice that compliments should be expressed with actions as well as words. Stefan is amused by this, and Fran is simply happy for his blushing brother. Severin and Stefan then announce that they are heading into the forest to investigate. As they leave, Fran waves goodbye and tells them to please take care, and a maid echoes the sentiment. Fran suddenly calls out to brother Stefan again, looking very worried and holding his protective brooch. He explains that his charm worked because there was a cursed tree in the forest that was completely black. He gets flustered trying to describe the event, making a whoosh sound, and then nervously asks if he should take his brooch off now. Severin quickly reassures Fran, telling him to keep the brooch on and not to worry, because brother Stefan is very skilled with magic. Stefan adds that he can cast the same protective magic as the brooch and will eliminate the curse if he finds it. Fran, however, still looks concerned, and the situation feels like a bad omen or a flag to him. Severin notices Fran's continued worry and playfully suggests that if he's that concerned, he should give them a kiss to pray for their safety. Fran takes this request very seriously, his expression becoming determined as he agrees to give a big one. He then plants a large chew kiss on a surprised Severin's forehead. Not finished, Fran immediately says he'll do another one and gives a blushing Stefan a kiss on the forehead too. The two older brothers are left completely stupefied by this display. Severin, looking dazed, announces that they are going now, and the two depart for the forest. As they walk away, Fran thinks to himself that if he gets cursed, he must remember to let brother Stefan know immediately so he can help. He decides the best way to wait for their return is to take a nap. While Fran is resting, a sudden rumble shakes the villa. The maid, Kitty, is startled and cries out, "Hi-e!" Fran, waking up from the noise, is surprised and asks Kitty what's wrong. She asks if he also heard it, and she wonders if the sound was caused by his brother's magic. Fran touches the wall, sensing a smooth feeling. He recognizes it as being like cleaning magic and decides it's probably not a scary event. Looking out the window, he sees his brothers walking back to the villa, and they call out to him. Overjoyed, Fran calls both their names and runs out to meet them, shouting "Wah!" and "Welcome back," as he happily hugs Severin. Severin and Stefan smile kindly at their little brother, asking if he was worried about them. As they pat his head, Fran admits that he was. Later on, while sitting at the dinner table with a fork in his hand, Fran suddenly jolts. He explains that he was just napping when he was startled by a sudden, powerful surge of magic that went boom. Over dinner, Stefan explains what happened. They discovered a large number of cursed fairy trees in the forest. To deal with them, Stefan cast a wide area dispelling spell. Severin humbly clarifies that the spell could only be cast so widely because his own wind magic was assisting Stefan. Fran's eyes sparkle with admiration, thinking both of his brothers are incredibly cool and amazing. Severin then mentions that a strange thing kept happening. He would be guided by sudden gusts of wind, and following them always led to another cursed tree. Stefan confirms that this wasn't his magic. Fran, deeply impressed, thinks to himself that his brothers are amazing, just like heroes in fairy tales who are guided by legendary signs. As they finish, Severin thanks Fran for his prayers, saying they kept them safe, and they all wish each other a good night. The very next morning, Fran is urged to hurry and open the windows. Just as he does, a massive geyser of water erupts from the ground with a loud boom. Stefan, who is present, watches this and thinks to himself that he's made a good impression. A huge hot spring has just appeared in the courtyard. Stefan casually turns to Fran and comments that since the villa didn't have a bath, this worked out quite well. Fran, however, is panicking, worrying that the entire villa is going to get soaked. A tiny, weeping fairy can be seen apologizing from a nearby window. Fran sees the fairy and understands, then turns to his brother and apologizes, admitting this is all because he just wanted to take a bath. Stefan simply looks at him, finally understanding, and says, "Ah, So that's what you were worried about. With a flourish, Stefan uses his magic to control the geyser, and the water begins to whirl and settle into a perfectly formed spring. Fran is amazed by this feat and cheers. Well done, brother Stefan. He is eager to get in and invites Stefan to join him. Severin then arrives and asks if they should all get in right away, though he muses that it might be a bit cramped for all three of them. But they can't jump in just yet. While the brothers were preparing, the maids have already been hard at work, amazingly setting up the new hot spring area for them. Soon, all three brothers are relaxing together in the warm water. Stefan comments on how a bath, even in summer, is a good thing, and Severin agrees, adding that he can feel his body loosening up. Fran, soaking happily, simply exclaims that this feels good and is the best. After they get out and dressed, Severin apologizes for the wait, and Stefan reminds Fran to stay warm as the nights get cold. Fran happily agrees. Severin then suggests a plan, asking how everyone feels about a picnic by the lake tomorrow. Fran is ecstatic at the idea, shouting, "Picnic?" Stefan adds to the excitement by saying they can spend the whole day watching Fran practice his swimming, which makes Fran cheer, "Whoa." Fran gets so excited that he immediately starts planning the food with the chef, requesting apple pie. He explains that since his brothers are adults, they can have the brown stuff, which he thinks is caramel but is actually cinnamon, on their slices, but he just wants a regular one. As Fran is making his request, Stefan leans in and quietly asks the chef to please make one that isn't sweet as well. Fran overhears this and is astonished, marveling that brother Stefan is so grown up he eats things that aren't even sweet. This innocent remark makes both older brothers burst out laughing, trying to cover their coughs and PFD sounds. Stefan smiles and thanks Fran for remembering his preferences. Severin, also smiling, asks if their meeting is over and if they can finally start dinner. Fran enthusiastically agrees, exclaiming that food is essential. Severin then settles in and asks Fran to tell him all about his time at the villa. He brings up the cicada shell Fran found, and Fran excitedly confirms it, adding that he also wants to catch a dung beetle. The story jumps to the picnic the next day, where Fran is just waking up from a nap on the blanket. Severin and Stefan are sitting nearby, watching him. Severin smiles and asks if he's awake. Stefan gently asks if he's feeling well, noting he must be tired. He comments that Fran did a lot of swimming practice and probably hasn't recovered yet, adding that he worked especially hard on his flutter kicks. Severin agrees, observing that the results are showing, as Fran's swimming posture has become beautiful. Fran just makes sleepy noises, still half asleep. Fran groggily opens his eyes, remembering that they are in the middle of a picnic. He's still dazed and sleepy, so Stefan holds a fork with a piece of food to his mouth, telling him to open up. Fran, with his eyes half closed, just nibbles on the food. Stefan is amused and chuckles, commenting that it's like feeding a pet. Severin agrees, noting how rare it is to see Fran so calm. The food, which Fran finds yummy and refreshing, seems to wake him up a bit. The two older brothers continue their own quiet conversation. Severin asks if it's true that a person named Raphael has been in a very good mood lately. Stefan confirms this, explaining that after they reconciled, things were peaceful for a time. He then adds, however, that Raphael has recently started speaking in an aggressive manner again. As they talk, Stefan looks down at the placid Fran and gently pokes his cheek. He suggests that perhaps what they are all lacking is this kind of simple healing. Severin smiles and agrees, wishing things could always be this peaceful. They both begin to gently squish Fran's cheeks, causing the boy to mumble in annoyance that he wants to eat sandwiches. The scene ends with Fran happily reflecting on his time at the villa. He thinks about how he's thoroughly enjoying the summer house, especially since his older brothers are staying the whole time, and his father is coming to visit as well. He knows he only has about one more week there. He thinks about his goals, noting he still hasn't caught a dung beetle, but he did find a big cicada shell. As he rests, cuddled between both of his sleeping brothers, Fran holds his drink and happily wishes they could just make the summer house their permanent home. Fran, now 6 years old, has returned from the villa and is excited to see his friend Treiskun. He finds him in an alley and initially misunderstands the situation, asking if Treiskun is mugging someone and if his job change failed. Treiskun, looking annoyed, shoos him to safety, clarifying that he is not a mugger. From inside a nearby church, Fran secretly watches the fight he had stumbled upon. He sees Treiskun skillfully defeat two opponents and is impressed by how strong his friend has become. Afterwards, Treiskun tells Fran he has to go see his boss, and when they are walking together later, he explains it wasn't a job failure but a promotion. He then gives Fran a series of very specific warnings, like not to wander off or go with strangers, and Fran agrees to every rule. They walk through a different, more crowded part of the Imperial City, which is full of people and patrolling soldiers. Treize-kun seems worried in the new environment and tells Fran to hold his hand. Fran, however, is immediately distracted by the sight of a bakery stall and gets excited. After Treize-kun finishes his errand, he apologizes for the wait and asks Fran where he'd like to go. Fran gives a big thumbs up and happily asks him to please buy some bread. They sit on a bench in a beautiful park with a large, impressive fountain, which makes Fran think a lot of money was spent there. When their bread is split into a big piece and a small piece, Fran offers to take the smaller one for himself. Treize-kun, however, insists they switch, saying that since he is bigger, he should take the larger portion. He seems touched, commenting that Fran is something else for a noble. As they eat, Fran, in his hood, complains that the bread is hard, but Treize-kun thinks it feels soft. Treize-kun then asks Fran about his trip to the villa, and Fran beams, telling him he had a wonderful time, especially since his brothers were there to swim, play, and even nap with him. This reminds Fran of his gift, and he excitedly tells Treize-kun the story of how a fairy made a hot spring, right at the villa, which Treize-kun finds hard to believe. Fran then proudly presents his souvenir, a smooth, round stone that he found while splashing in the lake with his brother. He explains that it's supposed to be super hard due to magic and that it's rare, though not as rare as the dung beetle he wanted to find. Treize-kun, looking at the simple stone, seems to understand that Fran is sharing a valuable memory with him. He ruffles Fran's hair, accepts the gift, and with a warm smile, sincerely thanks him, promising to cherish it. Back at home, Fran gets another visitor, his sensei, who has come to play even though it isn't a study day. She has brought him a gift of colorful candies to fulfill their promise of a souvenir exchange. Fran is delighted, proclaiming that gifts are amazing as he happily eats the sweet treat. He then announces that it's his turn to give her a present. He excitedly says he will give her the prettiest one, and to his sensei's utter shock, he presents a large, perfect cicada shell. The sensei, who apparently collects these, gets so excited she momentarily forgets herself and teleports right behind him with a whoosh. Fran is just amazed by her cool magic, clapping and calling her amazing. He explains that he was originally going to give her a dung beetle he caught, but he and his brother Severin decided to let it go because it might have a family. The sensei, composing herself, thanks him for the wonderful gift and offers to use her magic to send the delicate shell safely to her home. Later, Fran asks his maid, Kitty, if she thinks the sensei liked the gift, and he feels very happy when she assures him she did, glad that both his friends were pleased. The scene changes again, and Fran is now at an outdoor table with the blonde prince, who seems annoyed. The prince complains about Fran being so relaxed in his garden, while Fran just wishes he were having a peaceful lunch like the one he had with his brother. The prince demands Fran tell him an exciting story from his summer trip. After a moment of hesitation, where Fran internally worries about the prince beating him up in the future, he decides on a story. He enthusiastically recounts his bug-catching adventure, explaining how Brother Severin found a magic bug and Brother Stefan sealed its magic, which allowed Fran to catch it with his bare hands for the first time. He finishes by saying how much fun it was to have teamwork with his brothers. The word teamwork makes the prince's mood darken, and he says that his older brother only talks about war. This makes Fran sad, and he quietly agrees that he doesn't like war either. The prince continues, explaining that while he understands wanting to expand the country, he fears his father's and brother's aggressive belief that small countries should just obey them will create resentment and ultimately lead to his family getting hurt. As the prince is lost in these dark thoughts, a gloomy mist appears to swirl around him. Fran, observing this, thinks it resembles the curse from the fairy tree. He also remembers a scene from the game where the prince, after defeating his possessed father, struck a cool pose with a shield. Determined to prevent a bleak future, Fran decides he must stop this mist. Worried that simply patting it won't work and that he might get in trouble with the prince's guards, Fran remembers his own protection. He takes off his own brooch and holds it out, offering it to the stunned prince. The prince stares at the brooch, and his grim expression softens, as he thinks to himself that this simple act somehow made him feel optimistic. Fran then stands up and gently pats the prince on the head. The prince is shocked, admitting it's embarrassing but also nice, as it's been years since anyone did that for him. Fran just beams, saying he loves head pats too, especially when his big brother gives them because it feels nice and fluffy. The prince, his dark mood completely gone, clutches the brooch gratefully. He seizes Fran's hand with intense pressure, declaring that Fran is his dearest friend and has cleared the fog from his eyes. As Fran winces from the pressure, he simply thinks that maybe the prince's father and brother just need to take a break. Fran's desperately running, looking completely exhausted as he ducks and hides. He seems to have given up, thinking he can't do it anymore, while an unseen voice cheers for him to keep going. It is then revealed that this was all just a game of tag, as Franz is stopped by the chef, who asks if the young master is all right. His older brother Severin arrives with the maids, and Franz immediately asks if the chef is not guilty, confirming he won't be punished for catching him. Severin smiles and says yes, telling the chef he did a good job and that it makes him happy to know the chef is so willing to act for Franz's sake, even calling him a loyal retainer. A maid then announces that lunch is ready, and Franz perks up, asking if there will be apple pie. Severin confirms there is and adds that he also loves their family's exquisite apple pie. This gives Franz a wonderful idea. He declares that when his big brother Stefan and his father return home in the autumn, they should all go on a picnic. Remembering that his brother Stefan doesn't like very sweet things, Franz suggests they have a special, not-so-sweet apple pie, just for him. Sometime later, Franz looks gloomy while standing next to Severin, sadly thinking that he hasn't seen his brother Stefan at all since they returned from the villa. Severin confirms that both Stefan and their father are very busy. To cheer him up, Severin suggests that Franz should try writing a letter to his brother, an idea that surprises Franz. Franz sits at a desk with a quill pen, carefully composing his letter. He starts by asking, "Dear brother Stefan, how are you, and are you feeling lonely?" He writes that he was surprised to hear he wouldn't be back until autumn but that he and Severin are waiting, and they should have a picnic when he returns. He signs it "Yours truly, Franz," and then adds a drawing of his brother, admiring his own genius for the good likeness. Feeling this is a perfect first letter, he decides to write one to his father next. He begins his father's letter by asking how he is and if he's staying energetic. He tells his father that he's sad they can't eat lunch together and mentions the new hot spring at the villa, hoping they can go together one day. As he finishes writing, he glances over and sees that his brother Severin has fallen fast asleep on a nearby couch, taking an after-meal nap. Severin wakes up a little later, and Franz cheerfully wishes him a good morning. Severin is surprised to see that Franz was able to write letters all by himself and asks if he can read them. Franz proudly tells him to go ahead. Severin reads one of the letters and is visibly moved, blushing as he holds it to his chest. He thanks Franz and tells him he will treasure this, thinking to himself how much he truly loves his little brother. A couple of days later, a large package arrives, and Franz immediately wonders if it's from his big brother Stefan. He is thrilled, hoping this means his feelings were able to reach him. Severin confirms that it appears to be a present and asks Franz if he'd like to open it. Inside the box are two amazing big plushies. Severin reads the attached card and explains that they are plushies of Kelpies, one for Franz and one for himself. Franz immediately asks his brother which one he likes more, but Severin smiles and says he likes them both equally, insisting that Franz should be the one to pick his favorite first. Franz happily chooses the paler-colored one. He explains his logic, saying that the other plushie has the color of brother Severin's magic, so he believes brother Stefan intended that one for Severin. Severin looks touched, quietly repeating, "The color of my magic." Severin then notices another card in the package and tells Franz that it appears to be a reply to his letter from Stefan. Franz is absolutely thrilled to get a reply. He holds the small card, squinting at the words, but he can only manage to read his own name. Severin notes with a smile that the writing is probably still a bit too difficult for him. Severin then reads his own card, which he says is the same, and it contains a message from Stefan to Franz. The message says that Franz's letter touched his heart, and in his absence, the gallant Kelpie will be there to protect him. Franz is amazed by this, exclaiming, "Ha ha, so this is the writing of a smart person," and decides he must put this precious card in his treasure chest. Franz cheers, "So you were praised," and Severin, blushing, confirms he was praised for being a good older brother. Franz says that getting praised makes you feel, wow, and Severin agrees, telling Franz his honesty is a virtue. Their conversation is interrupted by a butler, who apologizes and announces that their guests have arrived. The guest is Burkhart's Ama, who greets Franz Kuhn warmly. Severin is surprised by this, asking when Franz got to know him. Burkhart has brought two other boys with him. The two boys step forward and formally introduce themselves. One boy, Hartz, greets the estimated young lord, and states he is the fourth son of Marquis Grunblatt. The other, Sagami, greets him as well, identifying himself as the sixth son of Earl Lilliput. Franz stares at them, a feeling of recognition dawning on him, and he has a sudden, shocking realization. This is Spindly Hearts and Chubby Sagami, his future villain comrades from the game Battle of Ascalon. Severin explains to a surprised Franz that their father chose these two boys to be his official friend candidates. Burkhard adds that he just came to act as a bridge, though he leans in with a smile and whispers to Franz that his secret reason for visiting was because he missed eating the apple pie here. He then happily suggests that they should all eat apple pie together. In the dining room, Hearts and Sagami stand stiffly against the wall, looking very nervous. Franz invites them to come join him and Burkhard at the table to eat apple pie, but the two boys just flinch. Franz realizes they must be nervous because he is a higher rank. Wanting to put them at ease, he decides he at least wants them to go home thinking about how delicious the pastries were. He holds up one of his favorite biscuits and explains how a scone is delicious with jam, but the boys just stare in stunned silence. Seeing this, Severin gently suggests that Franz should take the first bite to break the ice. Franz takes a large bite of a pastry, and his face lights up with pure delight as he thinks how yummy it is. His enthusiasm breaks the tension, and he encourages the others to try the cookies and marshmallows too. Soon, all the boys are eating with Hearts exclaiming, "Oh, it's delish," and Sagami finding the food fascinating. Franz is happy, thinking the food tastes even better when they eat it together. Afterwards, Severin explains that they will play Franz's favorite game, which is an egg hunt where the maids hide eggs for them to find. Franz begins searching near a plant, but an unseen person asks if he's found one, and he has to admit, none. Just then, Hearts calls out that he found one, and Franz, along with Sagami, cheers for him. They gather all the found eggs in a basket, and after checking the tree branches, Franz determines the last eggs must be hidden near the tree roots. With renewed energy, he points forward and shouts, "One more to go," as Hearts and Sagami cheer, behind him. As they search, Franz and Sagami are both looking down and accidentally bump heads. Franz just says, "Ah, Sagami-kun," but Sagami turns pale with fear and immediately bows low, shouting, "I sincerely apologize, Franz-sama." Franz is completely taken aback, wondering why he is apologizing so much. Sagami, still shaking, stammers that he is sorry for not properly seeing what was in front of him, and Franz just reassures him that it's okay. Sagami then spots the final egg hidden nearby. To make amends for his mistake, he picks it up and formally hands it over to Franz-sama. Franz looks at the egg and then at Sagami, and he suggests that they should share it. Sagami's face lights up, and he happily agrees. Soon, Franz, Hearts, and Sagami are all smiling and laughing together as they share the treat. Franz feels a new relationship has been found and is filled with happiness at the thought that they could all become real friends. Watching from a table nearby, Burkhard smiles and notes that it looks like his role as a bridge wasn't needed after all. Severin watches them, looking immensely relieved, admitting to himself that he was worried Franz wouldn't be able to make any friends. Franz's older brother, Stefan, who has come home. Franz is so excited he stumbles while running to greet him, calling out for both Stefan and his other brother, Severin. At a meal together, Stefan explains that he is not on holiday just yet, as he must first head to the castle to report on the war situation. He does, however, promise that he will be free starting tomorrow, which makes Franz shout, "Yippee!" in excitement. Severin asks about their father, and Stefan confirms he will not be returning anytime soon, as he left right away to patrol the mountain borders before coming back. Severin notes that the mountain borders are where the elves live, and Stefan agrees this is probable. He also proudly mentions that their father has earned the nickname, Dragon Excellency, among the soldiers for his amazing drive. As they talk, Franz is eating a piece of apple pie but suddenly looks confused, thinking to himself that it doesn't taste like apple. His suspicion is confirmed with a sudden, wide-eyed realization, meat. There is meat. Severin sighs, knowing the chef has put meat in the filling again. The chef explains that he made a special meat apple pie with raisins and dill to give a boost of energy to the fatigued Lord Stefan. Stefan, who is eating it, calls the complex flavors luscious. Franz, seeing that it's for his brother's sake, decides to be brave and asks the chef to please make the weird apple pie for lunch again, which the chef agrees to. Stefan is impressed and praises Franz, telling him he did a great job and that his willingness to eat the pie was a suited action of a vassal. This praise makes Franz blush. Stefan then mentions that he heard Franz recently consoled Prince Raphael, which is something no one else has been able to do, and he asks Franz how he did it. Franz explains that he was asked to tell a happy story, so he talked about the time he went bug catching with his brothers, and he also petted the prince's back. He then adds the most important detail, saying there was a hazy mist around the prince, so he went pat, pat. His brothers are confused by this, but Franz clarifies that when he squeezed the amulet Stefan had given him, the hazy mist immediately disappeared. Severin is instantly alarmed by this, wondering aloud if it could be a curse and exclaiming, "No way!" to the prince. Stefan immediately stands, stating he has an urgent matter to attend to. He tells Franz to wait for him and not to leave the mansion. Severin says he will go too, and they both leave swiftly, leaving a sad Franz behind. Later, Franz is in his room when the maid, Kitty, arrives to get him changed into very expensive-looking clothes, explaining he has an important guest. Franz is brought to a room where he meets Prince Raphael's older brother, a man whose emotions feel out of control. The man introduces himself as the Crown Prince, Lord Lionel, and asks Franz if he can see anything. Severin, who is also there, wisely tells Franz to whisper to him first. Franz leans in and whispers to his brother that there is a black haze coming out of his ears. Severin calmly asks if it's from both ears, and when Franz confirms it's probable, he instructs him to stay behind Kitty. Stefan then steps forward and touches Crown Prince Lionel's ears. The prince screams in agony as a dark mist bursts from him, terrifying Franz, who worries his brother will get in trouble. The mist vanishes, and Prince Lionel kneels on the floor, looking relieved. He thanks Stefan, explaining that his auditory and visual hallucinations have finally cleared. He then turns to Franz, Stefan's little brother, and asks for his name. After Franz introduces himself, Lionel formally bows and thanks him, saying that thanks to Franz's eyes, a horrible curse was warded off. As he prepares to leave, admitting he snuck out, Lionel asks Franz how someone his age would forgive their own brother. Franz gives an innocent answer, explaining that he'd forgive them if they properly said sorry, gave him a hug and a kiss, and told him they loved him. After Lionel is gone, Severin confirms to Franz that the black haze was a curse. Franz, relieved, celebrates that Stefan's magic got rid of it. Severin then puts his hands on Franz's shoulders and explains that no one else, not even himself or Stefan, could see the curse. He clarifies that apparently only those who can see magic, which means only Franz, were able to see it. Because of this, he makes Franz promise to never approach a curse again and to immediately tell him or Stefan if he spots one. Franz agrees, though he can't help but feel this is a flag for a future event. His fear proves correct just a few days later when a knight arrives, announcing he is a messenger from their father, the Duke, who is calling for both Severin and Franz. Franz is struck with terror and shouts, "No way!" Alarmed, Severin asks if he sees something. Franz, panicking, tells him the night is super-duper black, and the curse is everywhere and all fuzzy. Severin reacts instantly, pulling Franz into a tight hug and covering his eyes, asking if it was too scary. As Franz holds onto his brother's arm, he feels the warmth from Severin's magic ring, and the black mist around them suddenly vanishes. He tells his brother he's okay and thanks him for the help. The knight, now free from the curse's influence, is initially suspicious but then bows deeply, apologizing profusely for his behavior. He vows to protect them with his life and safely escort them to their father. Franz, seeing the knight is now a good person, just asks to be taken to his father as they get into a carriage, wondering what this is all about. Franz and his older brother Severin travel in a carriage, having been called to the castle by their father. Severin, sensing the formal nature of the visit, advises his younger brother Franz not to make eye contact with anyone. When they arrive, Franz is filled with wonder, as it's his first time visiting the castle, and he finds it even more amazing than what he'd seen in the game. He sees his father and, forgetting all formality, excitedly runs to him shouting, "Daddy." His father greets him with equal enthusiasm, pulling him into a tight hug and asking how he's been. They are brought to their father's office, a place Franz has never seen before. A servant brings them cookies, and their father encourages Franz to eat and grow big, expressing his happiness at seeing both Franz and Severin growing taller and stronger. Severin then asks about the reason they were summoned, and his father confirms it is related to Franz. He explains that he has already received a summary from Stefan and that the knight who came to pick them up was also cursed, just like others they had found. He also informs them that he has begun cooperating with the church regarding Franz's special eyes. During their talk, Franz notices a bouquet of flowers on display, which he recognizes as one he gave his father. His father explains that he uses preservation magic on the flowers Franz gives him so he can always admire them. Just then, another servant enters, and Franz, now accustomed to his ability, whispers to Severin and asks if this servant is cursed too. A person from the church, who is accompanying them, confirms that this person is indeed cursed and that they can also see magic. Franz observes the servant and can see the curse all over his back. He also notices the man is clenching his teeth very hard. The hooded priest then steps forward and performs a purification, dispelling the curse with a soft whoosh sound. The servant immediately relaxes, and when asked, he confirms that his back feels fine and his teeth are safe. Franz's father is overjoyed and praises his son for a job well done, ruffling his hair. Severin also praises his good work, and Franz giggles happily, squishing his own cheeks. The father then questions the now-cured servant, who admits that he was feeling an unnatural level of malice and hatred towards nobles but now feels completely refreshed. As the servant and priest leave, Franz waves them goodbye. The priest stays behind and explains that the curse, which looks like a black haze to Franz, only appears as transparent steam to them. This makes it difficult to find the source, though they can identify the victims. Franz's father becomes very enthusiastic, asking the priest to bring all the victims together for purification. He notes that while the servants are easy to gather, the knights are scattered across different groups, which makes things harder. As they are leaving the office, Franz, feeling bad for the knight who first fetched them, offers him a treat from a box to make up. The knight, though currently working, is touched and gratefully accepts the snack, saying it is an honor. He reflects that he doesn't know why he felt such a strong desire for conflict, but he recalls other knights were similarly upset. Franz wishes they could just use his brother Stefan's magic to make the curse whoosh away, and the knight agrees, though he reminds him that using magic recklessly within the castle walls is forbidden. This makes Franz worry, and he asks if the priest will get in trouble for using magic earlier. The knight reassures him, explaining that his father, the Duke, is somewhat above the law. This talk leads to the subject of the Saintess. Franz's father begins to make a strong declaration, saying that when it comes to the royal family, the Triena family will be the one to. This mention of the Saintess sends Franz into a panic, as he fears he isn't ready for that part of the story and will be beaten up. Severin calms the situation, informing his father that the appointment of a Saintess doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Franz is visibly relieved, feeling he can rest easy for a while. Just then, a servant arrives to call them, saying His Excellent is waiting for them. They are brought to a lavish room where Crown Prince Lionel and his younger brother, Prince Raphael, are seated at a table laden with snacks. Lionel greets Franz warmly, saying it has been a while, and invites him to sit with them. The Crown Prince explains that he was about to have tea and decided to invite them both. Franz, seeing the prince is already eating, eagerly eyes a large, gooey cream puff, a dessert he has never seen in this world before. He takes a bite and is so impressed that he immediately tells Severin he must try it too. Prince Lionel, who seems much more relaxed than at their last meeting, smiles and agrees that it's delicious. He then gently encourages his own trembling brother, Raphael, to try some, asking if he likes sweets. Raphael shyly whispers, "Weiss," and after trying a treat, quietly says, "Like these macarons." After their tea, the scene shifts to Franz's swordsmanship lesson in the garden. His teacher, an 86-year-old former master sword fighter, is impressed as he watches Franz practice a unique technique, rolling on the grass while holding his sword. Franz is putting in extra effort because his brother Severin has come to watch. After one last enthusiastic "yup," Franz collapses, panting heavily, and surrenders for the day. Severin smiles and praises him for his good work. Later, Franz asks Severin if he wants to take a bath, which Severin agrees to. Just as they are making plans, their brother Stefan returns home. Franz is overjoyed and runs to welcome him. He asks if Stefan is done with work, and Stefan confirms that he is, explaining that Prince Lionel told him to go home and that he also has a break tomorrow. Franz cheers, "Oh," realizing this means both his brothers are free. Stefan, noticing Franz's energy, says he is planning to take a bath and invites Franz to join him. Franz shouts, "I'm going," and Severin adds, "With pleasure." In the bath together, Franz whispers to Severin that Stefan looks tired and sleepy. He then gets a determined look and announces that he will wash both his brothers' backs. He eagerly starts scrubbing Stefan's back, causing his older brother to tremble. When Franz asks if it's ticklish, Stefan just says it's fine and tells him to continue. Franz then moves on to Severin, noting to himself that it's hard work because his brother's back is so wide. Afterward, All three are relaxing in the water. Severin thanks Franz, saying the scrubbing felt really nice. As a reward, Stefan offers to wash Franz's hair. Franz sighs in pure bliss, thinking to himself how much he loves it when his big brother shampoos his hair. Severin watches them and smiles, agreeing that their feelings are the same. Franz, overhearing, beams and says that his brother's shampoo scrubbing feels so good, which makes Severin hide his face in embarrassment. Franz and Stefan both agree with the sentiment, and Stefan concludes, "Then this means all three of us feel the same way." Franz, surrounded by his brothers, resolves to continue being a good kid so he can protect these peaceful, happy days forever. Franz and his friend Treiskun sitting together on a park bench, enjoying the great weather. Franz, whose current name is Franz Dux Triena, reflects on his situation, knowing it has been a few months since he remembered his past life. He is aware that he is living inside the game War Chronicles of Ascalon Empire, and that his future involves the game's hero appearing and beating him to a pulp. Because of this knowledge, Franz is working hard to be a good boy. He asks Treiskun if he knows how to get to the neighboring country, as he recalls the prince in the game mentioning something about what lies beyond the borders. Treiskun suggests he might be thinking of the peaceful kingdom of Gladian and explains that a very large river separates the two kingdoms, requiring a boat to cross. Franz, wearing his hood, asks if he could just swim across it, but Treiskun bluntly informs him that he will die unless he is a very good swimmer. This is bad news for Franz, who grunts in frustration, knowing he can only swim in water that's half a meter deep. Treiskun continues, explaining that he heard about a river near a recent temp job. He says that if you follow that river by boat, it will eventually lead to the big river connecting to the Gladian kingdom, though he adds that the carriage ride just to get to that area takes 2 days. This reminds Franz of his own gift, and he points to the tough shell he had given Treiskun, exclaiming that it's the souvenir he brought for him. Treiskun holds up the shell and tells Franz a story, explaining that there was a fight at his workplace where someone shot at him with a bow. The arrow struck the shell, which saved his life, and he sincerely thanks Franz for it. Franz is terrified by this story and squeaks in fear, but Treiskun calmly says it happens a lot, especially with people from the newly made territories. Franz, in a panic, asks if he's okay or dying, but Treiskun assures him he's not. He then adds that one of Franz's brothers also helped him out during the incident, which surprises Franz, who immediately asks which brother it was. Treiskun says he doesn't know, as the man was only called Lieutenant Triena. Franz immediately assumes this must have been his brother Stefan. Treiskun continues, explaining that a dispute broke out with another village while they were working on the river. The situation was tense, as the other side was armed with soldiers and demi-humans, and even their own side's knights were being weirdly aggressive, making it feel like a war was about to start. Then, for some reason, the villagers set their own village on fire, and it became a huge fire. Hearing the word fire, Franz becomes visibly distressed and asks what happened. Treiskun confirms he heard about it, which causes Franz to panic internally, as he realizes this event perfectly matches the opening sequence of his game. He knows this is the confirmed event where the hero's village is burned, causing the hero to swear revenge on the Empire. Franz collapses in a mental spotlight of despair, realizing the scenario is playing out exactly as he feared. He thinks the timing is perfect and that the hero is probably being raised by forest spirits right now. This means that in 10 years, that hero will come to beat him and his brothers to a pulp. He's terrified of the physical beating to come. Treiskun, seeing his friend shaking, asks if he's scared of fire. He tries to comfort the crying Franz, telling him it's fine because they put the fire out immediately. He clarifies that it wasn't him, but Franz's brother who did it. Franz looks up with tears in his eyes as Treiskun explains that his brother used magic to make a great, heavy rain fall, which quickly extinguished the flames. He also mentions there was another important, high-status man they called His Grace, who personally stopped the fire's spread by destroying a house and telling everyone to stay calm. Treiskun says this made him realize there are great people in the Empire too. As he listens, Franz realizes with shock that Lieutenant Triena must have been his brother Stefan, and His Grace was almost certainly his father. Later, back in his noble clothes, Franz greets his brothers Severin and Stefan, asking if they are done with practice. Severin explains that a tournament for knight apprentices is happening soon, so he was having Stefan check his stance. Franz gets very excited, shouting, "A tournament? I want to go!" Severin gently tells him that the apprentice competition isn't for public viewing, and since it's at the royal court, he doubts Franz can come. Seeing Franz's disappointment, Severin quickly adds that there will be a night festival in the winter, a big event with market stalls and bards. Stefan offers to ask their father for permission, and Franz beams, saying, "Yes, pretty please." However, he also feels a strange unease, wondering why the event gives him a bad feeling. To show off his own skills, Franz asks his brothers to watch what he's practiced. Severin puts up a barrier, and Franz yells, "Hiya!" as he successfully creates a perfectly round shape of light magic, cheering, "I did it." His brother Stefan, however, gets curious and reaches out to touch the orb, which vanishes with a pssh sound. Severin scolds him for touching it, but Stefan just says he was curious. This makes Franz angry, and he stomps his feet, thinking his brother's recklessness is exactly like father's. He shouts, "Big brother Stefan, that's not good. That's dangerous." Stefan immediately apologizes and promises not to do it again. He then leans down to the pouting Franz and asks him to please stop being mad, while Severin chuckles that his older brother can't win against Franz. Sometime later, Franz is on a swing, being pushed by his maid, Kitty. He's feeling lonely as his brothers are out and it looks like it's about to rain. This makes him comment on how amazing Stefan's rain magic is. Kitty agrees that he is adept at water magic, and Franz recalls how his brother washed his hair by magically making a bowl of warm water appear, which felt warm and nice. He then asks if Severin is also strong, and Kitty confirms it, saying there are rumors among the nobles about Severin's promising future in both swordsmanship and martial arts. This leads Franz to sadly remember that his own character in the game was seriously weak. Just then, it begins to rain, and Kitty tells him they need to run inside. As they do, a loud kaboom of thunder crashes, making Franz shriek in terror. He freezes, worried that thunder strikes the fastest person. Kitty, seeing he's scared, offers to carry him inside instead, which he tearfully accepts. As another kaboom flashes, Franz looks into the bushes and is shocked to see a young boy with spiky hair staring back at him. Kitty asks what's wrong, but when Franz looks again, the boy is gone. He wonders if he was mistaken, but he is sure of what he saw. The shock and the rain cause Franz to fall ill with a fever. He is put to bed, confused because it's still noon, but Kitty tells him to rest. As he drifts off, he identifies the boy he saw as the young hero. The next morning, his brothers Severin and Stefan are at his bedside. They tell him he has a high fever and must take his medicine. Franz, feeling wobbly, makes a face at the bitter medicine. Severin coaxes him by promising him cold and delicious apple pie afterward. Franz gulps down the bitter medicine, and Severin praises him and gives him the pie. Stefan explains that it's believed to be a psychological fever caused by the lightning. As he settles back into bed, Franz thinks this was a wobbly start. He's still curious if what he saw was a dream or if it was really the hero, but for now, he just wants to rest and get better so he can thank his brothers. A small, chibi-style Franz looking relieved and letting out a sigh. But his expression quickly changes to one of serious contemplation as he glances sideways towards a large building, a flush on his cheeks while he thinks. Suddenly, a new character with dark, messy hair appears, introducing himself as Arthur. He strikes an energetic, dazed pose. The scene shifts, and an off-panel voice gives instructions to let Arthur rest well and prepare nutritious food for his recovery. Then we see Franz, who recalls being sick yesterday but is now fully healed thanks to medicine from his brothers. He remembers seeing his brothers off and decides to take a nap, feeling proud of his own cleverness. As he walks, however, nearby bushes are seen rustling. Franz stands nervously before a door, terrified about what's inside. He imagines the hero waiting to pass judgment, with a swinging sword the moment he opens it. In a small chibi form, he nervously peeks the door open, feeling he must check. A close-up reveals his worried face as he thinks that if the hero is truly there, his brothers might be in danger. He listens carefully but hears only silence from beyond the door. He enters the passage and is surprised to find it brightly lit, looking more like a hotel corridor than the creepy place he envisioned. The illustration details the passage, showing a tatty wall, bumpy ground, and even a small mouse. Franz realizes someone must have used light magic to illuminate the area, assuming it was the hero. Just then, a door opens and another boy named Treize-kun appears, saying he's here and has something to ask Franz. Treize points to the floor where the hero, Arthur, is lying unconscious. Treize explains that he saw Arthur coming out of the church and called out, but Arthur unexpectedly shot magic at him. When Treize fought back, Arthur suddenly collapsed, which Tries guesses was from magic depletion. Franz mulls this over, noting that magic users can recover by eating and sleeping. This troubles him, as imperial logic dictates only nobles can use magic, yet the hero clearly can. Tries confirms Arthur came from the church and asks Franz what to do with him. Tries suggests either making up a story and getting his boss involved or just closing off the church. As they speak, Arthur's finger twitches. Arthur suddenly springs to life with a loud, "Hey-ya!" apologizing and claiming his magic came out by accident. He casually mentions he's used to being questioned by police in his old world but not in this one. Franz is stunned, wondering if the hero was always this strange, a fact he missed because the hero wasn't voiced in the game. Tries confronts Arthur, asking why he was in the church since it's abandoned, guessing he planned to use it for lodging. Arthur attempts a dramatic introduction using old-fashioned samurai language but quickly corrects himself and proudly declares he is the hero. Tries is completely bewildered by Arthur's strange way of speaking and calls him suspicious, threatening to arrest him. The scene cuts to Arthur tied up and hopping, complaining that this is too much, while internally monologuing that he's just a normal college-age otaku. Tries, looking annoyed, questions Arthur's other weird behaviors, just before Arthur is slammed face-first onto the ground. Later, a small chibi Franz looks up and agrees to a plan. Tries informs Franz he will investigate Arthur, which Franz agrees to, saying he'll manage and thinking it's fine as long as the hero stays away from his house. Tries tells Franz to go home and to be careful of the hero's magic. Franz is then shown sitting alone, his hands gripped tightly on his knees. He worries about the hero, acknowledging that the hero is very strong and that even his brothers might not be able to win against him. His face is full of concern as this thought trails off. The scene changes to a sunny garden, where Franz spots an older man with shears and calls out, "Grandpa." Franz hops over and asks the gardener to play. The gardener, addressing Franz as young master, smiles and says he just reached a good stopping point in his work and would be pleased to play. Franz explains that his giant cicada shell is gone, possibly because it wasn't dried properly. Now riding on the gardener's shoulders, he points excitedly and declares he wants a cool branch instead. As the gardener carries him, Franz thinks about finding a long and strong-looking branch to use as a countermeasure against the hero. The gardener agrees and says there are good options further in heading straight there. Franz yells, "Whoa," as they move quickly. Still on the gardener's shoulders, Franz exclaims, "Wow," and the gardener notes that the young master seems stronger. Franz laughs happily, telling his grandpa he's amazing. The gardener points out some recommended branches and Franz says, "Wah," as he looks at them. Franz studies the branches, finding it hard to decide and asks his grandpa for his opinion. He admires one long, twisting branch for its cool curves and another for being strong and thick. The gardener agrees both are great and also points out the nice curves on the second one, while Franz continues to deliberate. After Franz makes his choice, the gardener offers to smoothen the handle part for him. Franz is thrilled by this, exclaiming, "Whoa." The finished branch looks shiny, strong, and very stylish. Franz thanks his grandpa and wishes him luck with his job, and the gardener tells him to take care. Later, Franz sees someone in a nearby gazebo and thinks it might be his big brother. But the gardener gently holds him back. In an instant, several maids surround Franz. One begins fixing his hair, another spots mud on him and calls for a handkerchief, and a third adjusts his collar. The chapter ends as a text box announces the appearance of Franz's grandfather, and Franz is shown calling out, "Grandfather." Franz, in a small, bowing form, politely greets his grandfather, mentioning it has been a while. We see a close-up of the grandfather, who remains silent with a serious, mustached expression. Franz explains through his thoughts that this is his grandfather who lives in the countryside and only visits their house once a year. He also thinks about how his grandfather is so quiet that he can't even remember ever having a real conversation with him. As the grandfather continues to stand silently, a worried Franz begins to wonder if this silence means his grandfather wants him to leave. Just then, his eyes land on a sparkling cake he has never seen before. Deciding to be brave, Franz asks his grandfather if he can please stay and keep him company. The grandfather looks down as Franz holds up the special branch he acquired earlier. While the grandfather silently wonders what the branch is, Franz internally admires how cool his grandfather's beard looks. His grandfather then speaks, inviting Franz to sit down. Franz is overjoyed by this, exclaiming, "Yes," and feeling happy that he spoke up. A close-up shows a fork lifting a delicious piece of chocolate cake, and Franz thinks about how chocolate is an incredibly rare treat in his world, something even high-ranking nobles rarely get to eat. He excitedly asks his grandfather if the cake is delicious. After taking a bite, Franz says yes, and mentions that his brother Severin once gave him chocolate-scented tea, which leads his grandfather to ask if he already knew about chocolate. Franz exclaims how delicious the cake is as he looks at the less than half portion remaining. He suddenly stops chewing, thinking that the cake will disappear if he swallows it. He comes up with a plan to just let the chocolate melt in his mouth, wondering if he can make the flavor last all the way until night. His grandfather notices him stop and asks what is wrong. The grandfather then slides the rest of the cake, which was meant as a souvenir for everyone, over to Franz. Franz is stunned but then shouts "Yua!" and thanks him, realizing he can eat it all. As he takes another bite of the delicious cake, he starts to feel a bit bad about being the only one to eat it. A tiny angel Franz appears, telling him to think of his brothers and father, while a tiny devil Franz just tells him to eat it. Franz becomes thoughtful, wondering if Severin, Stefan, and his father will also want to eat the cake when he returns. With a determined look, Franz decides he can endure and asks his grandfather if he can give the cake on his plate to his brothers instead. His grandfather tells him he can eat as much as he wants from the table, as there is still one more cake. Franz lights up and suggests they eat it together, which his grandfather agrees to. They sit and eat together, and Franz asks his grandfather if he likes chocolate too. The grandfather replies, "I do." Franz then cheerfully adds that apple pies are also delicious and suggests they eat apple pie together tomorrow, and his grandfather agrees. Later, a servant announces that the grandfather will walk Franz to his room. During the walk, Franz asks if his grandfather has ever been on a boat. The grandfather replies that he used to command a combined fleet, and an image shows him like a conductor before many ships. Franz, amazed, asks what that is, and his grandfather explains it just means many boats. Franz thinks this sounds very strong. Franz remembers that Tri said he would need a boat to visit the neighboring country and asks how to get on one. His grandfather explains that he can board any Triania-owned ship and can even call for him to be picked up. Franz is thrilled, thinking how much fun he's having and how much he's learning. As they walk holding the branch, Franz notes how tall his grandfather is. The grandfather smiles and says Franz will be big one day too. As they reach the stairs, the grandfather reminds Franz about his branch. Just as Franz is about to enter his room, his big brother Stefan returns home. Franz happily welcomes him back. Stefan then notices their grandfather, bows politely, and says it has been a while, adding that he's relieved to see him in good health. The grandfather just stares at him silently and intensely. Stefan explains that he heard his grandfather was visiting, so he took an early leave from work. Franz excitedly tells him about the delicious cakes their grandfather brought. Stefan smiles and pats Franz's head, saying that's great. As Stefan walks up the stairs, he thinks about how his grandfather's presence is as impressive as ever and that he's always been dignified. He admits to himself that he has never really spoken much with him. He glances at a blushing Franz and asks if he gets nervous, but Franz just happily enters his room holding his twig. The story shifts to a very formal, tension-heavy aristocratic breakfast. The family is shown praying before the meal. As Franz takes a bite of his apple pie, his face fills with silent horror. He realizes with a that potatoes have been mixed into it. He internally screams, "How could you?" discovering that someone had turned a sweet potato-like item into a cream paste and mixed it with the pie. Stefan notices his expression and asks what is wrong. Stefan asks if Franz dislikes yam potatoes. He explains that this is different from their usual potatoes and that sometimes they are given food they aren't used to. He clarifies that yam potatoes are used as preserved food during emergencies. A confused Franz asks if this means a potato party, and Stefan advises him to get used to them. Franz then asks his grandfather if he likes potatoes, and the grandfather replies that they are good baked. Franz gets an idea, suggesting tempura is also sweet and yummy, but then gets flustered, admitting he doesn't know how to make it and muttering about sputtering. In oil? Franz looks at Stefan with pity, saying that since he doesn't like sweets, emergency times must be hard for him. Stefan chuckles and tells him not to look so pitiful, explaining he can eat them with oil and salt. The grandfather silently wonders if Stefan dislikes sweets. Stefan clarifies he finds them good in small amounts but they give him heartburn after a full tea party. The grandfather then asks about Severin. Severin says he's good with sweets and often eats apple pie with Franz. Franz adds that Severin also likes the brown powder, which Franz identifies as cinnamon, saying he likes its smell. Severin concludes that the simplest food might be the most delicious. Stefan apologizes to his grandfather for the ruckus, but the grandfather, after munching for a moment, says, "No, He mentions the chocolate cakes he brought as souvenirs. Stefan then asks if they can have the souvenir for tea time. The grandfather agrees, telling them to eat with everyone. Franz adds that the cake was a bit bitter but was tasty with milk. Stefan and Franz get excited about having a tea time with yummy chocolate cake, and Stefan invites their grandfather to join. Franz is overjoyed, thinking how awesome it is that his brothers and grandfather are all there. The scene changes, showing Franz's father returning in his carriage. Franz had seen him from the hill and went to ride home with him. His father asks if Franz met his grandfather, and Franz happily confirms, yes, adding that they ate cake together. The father looks sad, saying it's a shame his timing was bad and he couldn't eat with them. He pats Franz's head and says he has other things to do. But then he tells Franz that he should come watch Severin's match too. Franz is shocked, asking, when, and exclaiming that his dad is going too. The father reveals it's the day after tomorrow. Franz yells, wow, thrilled that this will be a fun time, especially since he was told before that he couldn't go because it was only for knight apprentices. The day of the Apprentice Knights tournament, where a line of knights is shown saluting, ready to devote themselves to the event. We see a small Franz who admits he dozed off while waiting for the long preparations to finish. He is very excited, thinking the day feels extra special and how cool it all is. He remembers that he came to the event with his big brother Stefan and is also sitting with his father. He knows he must remain quiet as he is there to cheer for his brother Severin's match. His excitement bubbles over when he suddenly spots Severin down in the arena. Franz, wearing a large, elaborate hat, looks down with wide eyes and mouths, good luck, to the competitors. Down in the arena, the first battle begins as two knights face off, their swords clanging. Franz watches intently beside his father, who tells him to observe closely because Franz will have to participate in these tournaments himself one day. Franz responds with a serious yes. A match concludes as the referee calls stop and announces the winner. Franz, however, looks very confused. He doesn't understand the rules and isn't sure why the person won. He even wonders if the priests nearby are working to get rid of a curse. Despite his confusion, he decides it's still a lot of fun to cheer along with the crowd. Franz approaches his father, who gives him two tasks. First, to tell him when it's Severin's turn to fight, and second, to inform him if he spots anyone who has the miasma. Franz agrees to both. His father then tells him to be sure to give his brother a very loud cheer. As Franz counts the participants in the next group, he suddenly points and excitedly announces that Severin is up next. The match begins, and Franz is alarmed to see that his brother's opponent is a completely black, shadowy figure. Severin stands calmly as the figure lunges, and their father watches with a serious expression. Severin easily dodges the attack with a swoosh, prompting Franz to yell, good luck. Franz is captivated, thinking his brother Severin looks incredibly cool. After another clang, Severin's opponent's sword is knocked away. The referee quickly calls stop and announces the winner, Severin ducks Triena. Franz throws his hands up and cheers. Franz is ecstatic, shouting, brother Severin won, and amazing. His father agrees, saying it was great and truly worth seeing. Franz thinks it was truly awesome and so cool. His father suggests they have a celebration when they return home, and Franz happily agrees. As they are leaving, Franz and his father walk with a priest, who explains that a curse-dispelling magic circle is embedded in a nearby wall. He says it should activate just by walking past it. Franz's father wonders aloud if the curse is finally disappearing. As Severin walks by, the wall whooshes, and he looks back, confused. Franz's father and the priest become absorbed in conversation, with his father suggesting a meeting in his office and the priest agreeing to discuss the results with the Board of Magic. Chibi Franz watches them, realizing they've started talking about work. Suddenly, Franz spots something small and dark flit through the air and attach itself to the back of the priest's robe. He tries to get his father's attention, and he starts to run after them. He then notices something on the ground and sees his father is about to step on it. Franz gets flustered and runs off, thinking, geez. He complains internally that adults always get immediately immersed in their work. He finds himself in a corridor surrounded by strangers but thinks he can still catch up to his father if he hurries, wryly reminding himself that he's technically an adult on the inside. He runs out to a courtyard with a large fountain and is stopped by a beautiful young woman in a large hat. She looks at him and asks if he is lost. Franz just looks up, confused. The woman remarks that she has seen something unusual and her attendant agrees, referring to Franz as a child who has lost their way. Franz is flustered, and the princess calls him a poor woeful one. She notes that a knight would normally lend a hand in such a situation and formally offers to take him under her protection. As she speaks, Franz has a flash of realization and identifies her as Princess Arabelle. Franz remembers who she is, Arabelle, the princess of this kingdom and even more importantly, his big brother Stefan's fiancée. He recalls a scene from the game, which felt like a fairy tale, where a female knight asked the princess if she was injured, and he marvels that two such dignified people exist in this world. He continues to recall game lore, remembering that Princess Arabelle is 1 year younger than Prince Lionel. In the game story, she was imprisoned in another city, but a clever player could recruit her into the hero's party. Franz privately notes that he didn't bother to do that in his playthrough. As he thinks, he zones out of the princess's current conversation, realizing he's heard this particular story from her 3 times already. Franz sits nervously in front of a piece of cake, too afraid to eat it in her presence. He internally summarizes that she is, in short, one of the people who becomes the hero's comrade and helps defeat him. The princess, unaware of his thoughts, continues to speak, worrying that while her brother has calmed down, the king is still set on war, and she wishes she could stop it. She then looks up and taps the table, remarking that it should be time for Duke Traina to arrive. Just then, she spots someone approaching and says it looks like he's right on time. Franz's father, Duke Traina, walks up to the table. Princess Arabelle greets him, stating she has been looking after his child. The Duke apologizes to the princess for any trouble Franz may have caused. Franz looks up at his father with relief. The princess assures the Duke that all is fine and tells Franz he can go to his father, which makes Franz shout an excited yes. Franz runs and leaps into his father's arms, bursting into tears and wailing. His father holds him close, apologizing to the princess for the scene, while the princess just laughs, pleased that her request has been completed. As the princess leaves with her attendant, she smiles, thinking to herself that she had a lot of fun and was even able to talk about the night. She tells her attendant that she'd like to have tea there again. Meanwhile, Franz's father carries the still sniffling Franz away, reflecting that many new connections can be formed just by making such an outing. Back in his room, Franz is hugged tightly by his maids, who exclaim how glad they are that he's safe. One admits she started to panic when she realized he was missing from the room. Franz, still crying, explains through slurred speech that he got scared and apologizes for wandering off. He then makes a new resolution, declaring that from now on, they must all hold hands when they are in large spaces. A servant enters, announcing that the princess has sent a gift to the Duke's son. The gift is a large selection of cakes, which Franz recognizes from the tea party. His father smiles, appreciating the kind action and noting that he guessed Franz was too nervous to eat properly in her presence. Sitting on the couch with his father and Severin, Franz admits that he was so nervous it felt like something was stuck in his throat. But he adds that he feels much better now because his father came to pick him up. Franz's father smiles warmly at him and promises that if Franz ever cries, it doesn't matter where he is, his dad will always come to get him. This makes Franz cheer, yay. With the excitement over, it's now time to go home and prepare for Severin's victory celebration. The chapter ends with Franz clinging tightly to his father in a strong hug. The family begins to prepare for a celebration at home to honor Severin's victory in the tournament. Stefan is organizing the event and he gives Franz an important job. He asks Franz, who is standing next to the gardener, if he can help by picking out flowers for the main decoration. Franz is thrilled with this responsibility and eagerly says he will do his best. Franz proudly explains to the gardener that he was chosen for this task. The gardener asks him what color he wants for the main theme. Franz, with an excited expression, says he wants to use green flowers because he feels the color green is a perfect fit for his brother Severin. The gardener thinks for a moment, mentioning that he has been trying to improve the flower varieties in a certain part of the garden. He then reveals he managed to grow a new type of rose this year and offers to show it to Franz. When Franz sees the flowers, he is delighted, exclaiming that they are green and incredibly pretty. He thinks they look just like Severin's magic. The gardener, rubbing the back of his head, admits he was actually trying to grow pure white roses. As he cuts the green roses for Franz, he says he is truly happy that these new flowers will have their time to shine and be used for Severin's celebration. Franz, holding his basket, thanks the gardener very much. Back inside, Franz gives the basket of flowers to a maid, instructing her to make them look cool, and she agrees to his wish. Just then, he suddenly spots his grandfather standing by the door and calls out to him. Franz walks with his grandfather, welcoming him home and explaining that they are celebrating Severin's win. He chatters excitedly about how cool Severin was, even making a whoosh gesture to show how he dodged his opponent's sword. His grandfather listens and then silently holds out an ornate box. Franz asks if the box is a gift for Severin, and his grandfather confirms it is a dagger. Franz briefly wonders if his brother will like it but quickly decides that a gift from their grandfather is sure to be appreciated. At that very moment, the door bangs open as Severin and their father return home. Severin enters and gives Franz a hug, and Franz excitedly yells that Severin and his father are both back. Severin then turns to greet his grandfather, who subtly hides the gift box behind his back. Franz, standing between them, immediately understands that the present is meant to be a secret, and his grandfather gives a small nod. The scene then transitions to the grand dining hall, where the family is making a toast to Severin's victory. At the magnificent celebratory feast, a smiling Franz congratulates his brother. Their father also praises Severin, telling him he performed well. Stefan adds that he got a bit too excited about the celebration, saying Severin's performance was even better than expected and deserved full marks. Severin admires the beautiful green rose decorations and says he's grateful for them. Stefan then points out that Franz was the one who chose the flowers, telling Severin to compliment him as well. Stefan praises Franz for doing a great job with the beautiful flowers. Franz explains that he chose them by visualizing Severin. Severin looks touched by this and thanks Franz, telling him it makes him very happy. Franz blushes, happy that his grandpa's flowers were a hit. While sipping his drink, Franz asks Severin if his opponent was older, and Severin confirms he was a senior by 2 years. Just then, Franz gasps, suddenly remembering the gift, and he quickly looks over at his grandfather. The grandfather gets Severin's attention by saying his name. When Severin politely responds, his grandfather simply stares at him in silence. Franz watches this interaction, feeling incredibly restless. He has to fight the overwhelming urge to blurt out that his grandfather has a surprise present, but he manages to hold back. Finally, the grandfather steps forward and presents the ornate box. Severin looks from the box to his grandfather, hesitantly asking if he should open it. His grandfather remains silent, so Severin opens the box, his face lighting up with a happy, surprised expression as he looks inside. Inside the box is a beautiful crystal dagger. Stefan exclaims how pretty it is, and their father remarks that it is a very fine gift. Severin, looking stunned, thanks his grandfather for the gift, and the grandfather simply replies, "Thank." Severin then looks around at his family, thanking everyone. He seems genuinely moved, quietly saying that he is so happy and that he never expected to be celebrated this much. Franz observes this, thinking to himself that he clearly heard his brother's soft, happy words. Later, on church day, Franz is in a carriage, nodding off as he travels with his family. He thinks about how he always gets sleepy listening to the priest's sermon at the large gathering they must attend every 3 months. He suddenly snaps awake with a gasp just in time to hear the priest mention the saintess and the demon king being put to slumber. Franz is horrified, realizing he had completely tuned out because he misheard and thought the priest was talking about a Mr. Demon King. He sees a woman in the church who can supposedly lift curses, but as his father and Severin lead him away, he feels frustrated that he missed his chance to ask any questions. As they leave, Franz approaches a sparkling magic doorway. He gets excited, wondering if it will blow air to clean off dust or maybe feel tingly. He walks through, but nothing happens at all. His father asks him if anything is wrong or if he sensed something. A disappointed Franz replies that nothing happened. His father smiles, thinking to himself that the curse-dispelling circle placed there must be perfect if even Franz couldn't feel it. Severin then hands Franz a basket of alms and tells him to wait in the carriage while he goes to make a donation. He warns Franz not to get flustered if he gets surrounded by the children from the slums, and Franz agrees. A crowd of children does gather, but Franz notices they seem orderly and are lining up properly, which is different from usual. Despite this, Franz has a moment of panic, covering his eyes and thinking he can't do it, worried he'll look suspicious. Severin looks back, confused. A child then calls out politely, asking the honored noble for his blessings. Franz peeks out and asks them to wait a moment. Suddenly, the hero Arthur appears in the line, loudly announcing in his old-fashioned way that he is also hungry and their meal situation is worrying. Franz, surprised by their good manners, begins handing out food. Arthur and all the children thank him politely, all of them copying Arthur's "Degazoo" catchphrase. This bizarre scene leaves Franz completely bewildered, his mind unable to process what is happening. As Franz watches Arthur, he decides that he doesn't seem to be under the Demon King's influence. As the carriage begins to pull away, Arthur and the children wave. Arthur shouts, "Duke? Thank you for your mercy. Degazaru." Franz, inside the carriage, freezes in shock. He has a terrifying realization. Arthur knows who he is and knows that his family is destined to become evil. Franz panics but tries to calm himself, thinking it will be fine since he's a good boy now. After recovering from his shock, he suddenly asks Stefan how long it would take to travel to the neighboring country by ship. Stefan calculates for a moment and replies that it would take 1 day to reach the port and then another 2.5 days on the ship, so about 4 days in total. Franz repeats, 4 days, and looks determined, thinking that is a manageable amount of time. Their father returns to the carriage, and Severin mentions he is curious about something and excuses himself, leaving Franz sitting there in shock. On the ride home, their father suggests they buy a souvenir for their grandfather. Both Franz and Severin think it's a wonderful idea. Severin wants to thank him for the dagger, and Franz is just sure his grandfather will love it. The chapter ends with a panel showing Franz giving the souvenir to his grandfather at the entrance. Franz thinks about how his grandfather said, "Thank you," which made him feel happy too, and how that happiness keeps spreading. One cold morning, with Franz joining his grandfather for breakfast. He wishes him a good morning, and his grandfather returns the greeting, agreeing that it is cold and noting they will need to clean the fireplace soon. A maid also greets Franz, observing that he is up early. At the table, Franz's father is present but plans to go out and return early, while his brothers Severin and Stefan are not there. Franz's grandfather asks him if he likes taking baths. Franz enthusiastically replies, yes, explaining that he loves how warm it is. This gives him an idea, and he excitedly asks his grandfather if they can take a bath together when he gets home. His grandfather understands and agrees. He then mentions that there is a hot spring at his estate and that white water comes from it. Franz's father explains to a confused Franz that he wouldn't know about it, since he has never been to the countryside. Franz immediately realizes it must be a milky white spring, and shouts that he wants to go there. His grandfather says, okay, and tells Franz he can visit when spring arrives, as it gets too cold there in the winter. Franz is delighted by this promise and declares that he seriously can't wait and will absolutely go. Later, as Franz walks with his grandfather, the older man asks him if he has enough toys. Franz thinks for a moment and replies that he has some, but also not much. His grandfather then asks him if he likes horses. Franz's mood brightens instantly and he exclaims, I like horses. Following this, the grandfather is shown carving a piece of wood. He then presents his finished work with a tada, a small, beautifully carved wooden horse. Franz is completely in awe, shouting, awesome, and exclaiming that his grandfather is incredible. He hesitates for a moment, shaking his head, before asking if the horse is for him. His grandfather confirms with a emichim. Franz is overjoyed, yelling, whoa, and thanking him profusely. He admires the cool wooden horse and decides he must name it. He is so busy playing with his new toy that he is distracted when a maid asks him about the curse-repelling brooch that Stefan gave him. A few days pass, and Franz is practicing his magic, successfully creating a round and smooth orb of light. He wonders to himself if he is getting better at using magic, and a maid praises him for how proficient he is. He had recently received a letter from his teacher, who he misses. The teacher mentioned being busy with work since autumn but wrote that he looks forward to training with Franz again. The letter also encouraged Franz to practice casting magic even when he is alone. Franz is practicing outside when he spots his grandfather watching him, surrounded by maids. He runs over happily and his grandfather says, your magic is good. He then pats Franz's head, telling him that he has grown up. Franz beams with pride, saying it's because he works hard to improve every single day. This happy moment is interrupted when his grandfather suddenly announces that it is time for him to return home. Franz is stunned and confused, asking return. His grandfather confirms, adding that he has already informed Franz's father and brothers. As his grandfather turns and begins to walk away, a maid gently prompts a silent Franz, asking if he isn't going to say his goodbyes. This snaps Franz out of his shock, and he takes off running, yelling, grandfather. He catches up to him and pleads, don't go back dash. He tearfully tells his grandfather that he doesn't want him to go, that he will miss him, and that he likes it more when he is there. His grandfather stops and looks down at him, gently explaining that he has citizens in his territory that he must protect and that he must return before the snow falls. He tells Franz that he also had a lot of fun and that having to part makes him feel lonely and regretful. Franz cries, "Me too." His grandfather then reminds him of his promise to visit the hot spring in the spring, saying he will be waiting. He calls it a short farewell. As the carriage pulls away, Franz waves with all his might, his eyes filled with tears, calling out, "Stay safe," until the carriage is gone from sight. Later, Franz is lying on a couch when his big brother Stefan picks him up. He asks Franz if he is lonely because their grandfather went home. Stefan sits with Franz on his lap, patting his head to calm him down. Franz, blushing, thinks to himself that he's not a baby anymore. Stefan smiles, reminiscing that the only thing he remembers from when Franz was a baby was him wriggling in his cradle. To cheer Franz up, Stefan tells him that a night festival will be held next month, which will have competitions and performances. He suggests that this way, Franz can make lots of new memories to share with their grandfather when he visits him in the spring. Franz's eyes light up at the idea, and he adds that he can also bring souvenirs. Stefan agrees that it's a great idea. Franz then asks if Stefan will be participating in the festival. Stefan replies, no, explaining that he has work to do at the castle during that time. The mention of the castle makes Franz remember his experience at the tournament. He warns Stefan to be careful, telling him he saw a black thing coming out of the castle floor. He explains that he saw it swoop and stick onto someone as they walked past. Stefan's expression turns serious as he clarifies, "Are you saying that the curse was emanating from the castle's ground?" Stefan nods, saying, "I see. That explains it." After Franz admits that he got lost right after that, Stefan suddenly lifts him high into the air, laughing and praising him for doing a great job telling him. Franz asks if he was helpful. After they play for a bit, Stefan teases him, asking that if he's not a baby, he should get off his lap. Franz just snuggles in closer, thinking that just for today, it's okay to be hugged a little longer. Elsewhere, Tries and Arthur are shown doing a side job, which involves drilling holes into clay slabs. Tries complains that he hates this kind of repetitive work, while a small chibi Arthur comments that he used to make pills this way. Tries can be heard yelling from another room about how fun the fight against yourself is, prompting Arthur to yell back, "Say what?" Arthur, now depicted in a small, childlike form, asks how many more slabs are needed. Tries, looking stressed, replies that they need to think about the space available for drying them. Tries' inner thoughts reveal that Arthur had snuck to the imperial capital in a knight's carriage. The next carriage back to his village isn't for another 2 months, so Tries has let him stay until then. He finds Arthur to be a very strange guy. He notes that besides being good at invisibility magic and wanting to marry his childhood friend, nothing else about him is clear. He also reflects on the magic sealing collars, which are originally for slaves. However, Arthur and the others willingly wore them after Tries explained it was necessary to control their magic and prevent them from running out. Arthur, working hard, calls out to a distracted Tries. Tries concludes that while Arthur is a good person who is devoted to his work and looks after the kids, his incredibly naive belief in peace seems abnormal, as if he lacks a proper sense of caution. Tries snaps out of his thoughts and tells Arthur to make sure he gets on the next carriage, warning him that if he misses it, it will be a long time before he can go back. Arthur confidently strikes a pose and says, "Leave it to me," declaring that he will properly earn the carriage fare and return home after he solves all the problems. Tries just sighs, wondering if this hero is all right in the head. Franz in a state of shock and despair, depicted as a horrified chibi figure. His baths have been temporarily forbidden. This is because the weather has been getting colder, and Franz, who is now 6, had been taking baths 3 times a day, which resulted in his skin becoming very dry and flaky. His older brother Severin had noticed Franz's arm and asked with concern if he was in any pain. After Franz said no, his father declared the bath ban, causing Franz to wail that if his baths are taken away, he has nothing else left in his life. 2 days after the ban, Franz is completely listless. He is seen plodding dejectedly and sighing, thinking to himself that he knows he isn't dirty, as someone uses cleanse magic on him, but he still desperately wants a real bath. At the breakfast table, his father notices his gloomy mood and announces that it is good timing, as Franz will be going out to the city with Severin today. His other brother, Stefan, is also at the table and tells Franz to make sure he follows Severin's side closely. Franz is momentarily confused, but then Severin smiles and explains that they will go to town to shop for some things, and their father has even dispatched knights to guard them. Franz becomes instantly ecstatic, cheering that he gets to go out and that it will be his first time ever going shopping in the city. His father smiles and tells him to go have fun. In the carriage, which rattles as it moves, Severin reads from a list and asks Franz about his favorite flower scents. Franz, sitting beside him, thoughtfully mentions roses, as well as the white and violet flowers from their garden. Severin explains their goal is to find bath salts and moisturizers that will not irritate his sensitive skin. As they arrive, Franz looks out the window and is surprised, noting that this doesn't look like the noble's district. Severin clarifies that commoners seem to have more knowledge about such products. When they step out of the carriage, Severin asks Franz if he is afraid of the unfamiliar place. But Franz, surrounded by little sparkles, says he is fine and that this kind of place actually resembles his past life. Severin is glad to hear this and tells Franz to hold his hand while they are in town, which Franz agrees to. As they walk, Franz is stunned to suddenly see Tristan standing in a shop. He quietly wonders if Tris has had a career change from his thug job. Tris doesn't look at him, and Franz remembers their connection is supposed to be a secret. Thinking quickly, Franz gets Severin's attention and points to him, proudly announcing to Tris that this is his cool older brother. Severin, ever polite, simply smiles at Tris and asks what kind of shop he runs. Tris replies that he sells dried flowers. Severin then explains his little brother's skin issue and asks if Tris has any products with positive effects. Tris recommends chamomiles and blizzard lavenders, explaining that there are extracts that can be put in the bath to moisturize the skin. Severin pats a shivering Franz, who is thinking, "so cold," from the name of the lavender, and is also flustered that his brother is talking about him. Severin then declares that he would like to procure as much of those two flowers as you can provide. Franz is internally amazed, thinking this is the true power of nobles. Tris, however, turns away and mutters that Severin is a naive aristocrat, and warns that he could be ripped off or sold fakes in a place like this. Severin just chuckles, saying he knows this is a good shop and that it was his instincts. He thanks Tris for the information and taps several large coins on the counter, calling it an information fee, which shocks Tris by its amount. Severin then adds that if Tris is looking for moisturizers, there is a trustworthy shop nearby that his benevolent little brother might find interesting. Excited, Franz thinks a simple greeting should be fine. They go to the other shop, and Severin explains to the elderly shopkeeper that he's looking for lotion for his brother. Franz peeks over the counter as Severin lets him smell different scents from jars, and Franz eventually picks one he likes. The shopkeeper says she will start making it, but it will take a while. While they wait, Franz gets bored and the shopkeeper tells him to feel free to look around. He wanders the shop, curiously observing a birdcage kept up high and some melted candles. He is suddenly startled by Tris, who is standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. Franz just exclaims, "Fascinating." A moment later, Franz looks out the window and sees Tris is already gone. The shopkeeper returns with the lotion, kindly warning Franz that hot water makes skin dry, so he should use cooler water. She also warns him to be careful as the crazy guy, Arthur, is still around and will be until the end of the year. Franz, however, is just thinking to himself, a pirate hat. As they leave, Franz peeks behind a curtain, wondering if the shop is connected to the next room. Afterward, Severin suggests they take a stroll through the citizens' district, explaining to Franz that these people live very different lives from them. Franz sees men working with bricks and asks Severin what they are doing, thinking this area looks close to where he once visited with Tris. Severin explains they are bricklayers showing gratitude to the earth spirit. Franz asks if they are using earth magic, and Severin confirms it seems so. Franz thinks the day has been very educational. The mention of spirits reminds Severin, and he asks Franz if there has been any contact from the fairy he met in the summer. Franz's face lights up as he remembers the fairy who made the hot springs, but he confirms there has been no contact from them. As they talk, a guard announces they are approaching Orion's bridge. On the bridge, Severin explains that this is the nobles' district, where they live, and it is separated from the citizens' district by moats and bridges to keep the two from getting too close. Franz looks over the edge in awe. He notices the water isn't flowing, and Severin clarifies it's a moat filled with water created by the 5th Emperor's water magic. Franz is amazed, noting that since they are on the 20th royal generation, the magic water is really long-lasting. Severin also points out the merchants and performers, explaining the bridge is a popular spot where many guards are also stationed. Suddenly, someone calls their names, and Franz turns to excitedly shout, "Big Brother Stefan." Stefan tells them it's time for them to go home too. He claims he was just on patrol, though he secretly just came to see them shopping. He waves goodbye and Severin, acknowledging his officer's muttering, says he will go patrol his own front. On the carriage ride home, Franz is beaming and giggling, thinking about what a fun day it was and how he couldn't believe they got to meet Stefan. As Franz sings a strange, nonsensical song, Severin pretends not to hear, instead wondering to himself how the hero, Arthur, is doing. Franz expressing his gratitude to his brother Severin for using cleanse magic on him, while Severin notes that Franz did well holding back for the past few days. Severin then announces he will add bath salt to the water, and Franz becomes incredibly excited, exclaiming that this is the bath he has long awaited and he's thrilled to be sharing it with his big brother Severin. As the salts hit the water, Franz shouts in amazement, calling the resulting pink water very pretty. Severin agrees that it's a pretty color and observes that mixing the salt with the hot water makes it cloudy. Franz, looking delighted, remarks that the pink, cloudy water looks delicious, just like strawberry milk, though an aside notes that strawberries and that kind of milk probably don't exist in this world. After a small sneeze, Franz encourages Severin to get in the water quickly, and as they soak, Franz sighs that the bath is nice and warm. Severin checks if the water is too warm, but Franz insists it's perfect. Franz then touches the water, noting with curiosity that it feels a bit gooey. Severin then asks Franz to make a choice, offering him either dried light chamomile or lavender blizzard to add to the bath. Franz feels the pressure of this serious responsibility, believing the most important person should be the one to decide, but Severin reassures him he can just pick whichever one he prefers. With his mind made up, Franz chooses lavender, reasoning that he has heard of that flower before. Franz holds the bundle of dried lavender and tells his brother Severin that it has the same wonderful scent as the purple flowers growing in their garden. As he's holding it, the flowers suddenly waft off the stems with a paff sound. Franz is completely startled and lets out a loud "Huva" as the petals burst into the air. Severin explains that this is normal, as sometimes the flowers get blown away just like a blizzard, otherwise they're just like any other flower. Franz, who had been startled and momentarily thought the flowers were alive, looks amazed. He laughs he, and exclaims, "Wow," finding the whole experience very interesting. Severin chuckles, agreeing with him and telling him to be careful while reassuring him that it's okay. After the bath, Franz is shown with very smooth skin. Severin checks him over, confirming that there are no problems anywhere. Franz cheers, yes, overjoyed that his ban on taking baths has finally been fully lifted. Later, Franz and another boy, Hartskun, arrive at a large house, politely thanking their host for the invitation. Their host, Sagami-kun, welcomes both Hartskun and Franz. Sagami-kun explains that he was alone at home because everyone else was out working, so he decided to call his friends over to visit. Inside, Sagami-kun suggests they play indoors next to the warm fireplace since it's very cold outside. Hartz and Franz happily agree, replying yes, and with pleasure. Sagami-kun suggests they all sit down on the floor together. Franz-sama fidgets a bit but agrees, mentioning that this is his first time ever sitting on a rug. Sagami-kun, also fidgeting, says, yeah, while Hartz-sama notes that it's true people don't normally sit on rugs. Sagami-kun asks if the spot is okay, explaining his motive was to chat at a closer distance with both of them. As Hartz sits, he touches the rug and exclaims that it's incredibly soft. Hartz-kun then turns to Franz-sama and tells him that he smells very good. Franz blushes at the compliment, feeling shy as he laughs softly. Franz then remembers and explains that he had gone shopping for bath medicines with his brother Severin. He adds that they also bought moisturizer. To demonstrate, Franz touches his own cheek, boasting about how very smooth his skin is. Hartz-kun realizes that the good smell is the same scent as Franz-sama's, and Franz confirms he's right. The scene implies Franz then applied the moisturizer to Hartz, who looks pleased but embarrassed, his skin now smooth as he says, "There, done." Nearby, Sagami-kun fidgets nervously. Franz spots him and brightly suggests that it would be better if everyone matched. He decides to apply the moisturizer on Sagami-kun too, making Sagami-kun yelp, "Hiya," in surprise. The three boys are then shown with glistening, moisturized cheeks. Franz is seen gently rubbing the lotion on Sagami-kun's face, who says, yeah, and thanks him very much. A few days later, the three friends are together again. Hartz and Sagami touch their own cheeks, smiling as they say, "Ew," and exclaim how nice it smells. Franz smiles, holding a cup, and a note clarifies he shared his lotion with them and everything is now a-okay. The scene shifts, and Franz is now having tea with Prince Raphael. Franz explains that his brother has been visiting the training grounds frequently because he wants to participate in the upcoming night festival. Franz continues, saying he was wondering if there was anything he could do to support his brother. As Prince Raphael listens, he recalls how Franz had come to him for suggestions while everyone else was out working. Raphael remembers feeling pressure as he wondered what to do. Back in the present, Franz offers his suggestion. He explains that whenever he tells his brother Severin that he is cool, Severin thanks him with a kiss. Franz adds that when he gives his brother a kiss on the cheek, his brother often reciprocates with a hug. He cheerfully encourages His Highness, Raphael, to try doing the same. Prince Raphael is visibly shocked by this, sputtering K-kiss, while Franz just cheers, yeah. Prince Raphael looks down, blushing and clasping his hands together, and states that he cannot do that. Franz is taken aback, saying it was a great suggestion that he had to think very hard about. Franz presses him, asking if he truly believes that, and insists that if Raphael tells his brother, their relationship is certain to grow closer. Franz reassures the prince that it will be fine, adding that Prince Lionel is a kind person. Franz cheers, yes, continuing to encourage Prince Raphael. He believes that Prince Lionel must be eagerly awaiting Prince Raphael's words and would surely be delighted. Having given his advice, Franz happily turns his attention back to eating his cookies. Prince Raphael watches him, looking thoughtful. He finally makes a decision, resolving that he will try telling his brother cool the next time he sees him. Sometime later, Prince Raphael sips from a cup and mentions a rumor that the Saintess has appeared. He also notes that because of this, the whole castle seems to be very busy. Hearing this, Franz thinks about the Saintess and wonders what her progress is. He has a threatening mental image of her, worrying that her magical powers are growing so fast she might soon be able to defeat him with a single punch. Raphael then asks Franz if Stefan will be participating in the night festival. Franz replies that Stefan can't, as he will be busy with work. This leads Raphael to ask if His Highness, the Emperor, does not go to church. Franz considers this, thinking that if the Saintess is in the church, his father might go. However, he concludes that since the high priest usually comes to the castle, his father doesn't really need to go. As their visit ends, a servant informs Prince Raphael that it is almost time for him to leave. As Prince Raphael stands to leave, he tells Franz that today was a pleasure. He then turns to Franz and promises that he will try out the suggestion they had discussed earlier. Franz beams, clenching his fists in excitement, and wishes the prince good luck. As Prince Raphael walks away, he says yes, and promises to let Franz know if his attempt worked out. Watching him go, Franz thinks to himself that the current prince seems like a person who would not beat him up. He acknowledges that this is a secret thought and that he would definitely be scolded by his butler and guards if he ever said it out loud. Franz reflects that the prince, to him, is just like any other friend he has. This marks another relationship that is completely different from how it was in the original game. Franz smiles, feeling excited and looking forward to the night festival. Today is the night festival. Franz, who is dressed in warmer clothes than usual, looks up at his brother Severin with great excitement. He exclaims that this is an actual festival and that it is amazing. Severin checks to make sure Franz's money is properly inside his pocket, noting he has pocket money to buy souvenirs. Franz, filled with anticipation, pumps his fist and declares that it's time. Franz walks up to a stall and politely asks the vendors what they are selling. The vendors, who are two children, welcome him. An observer notes that the children are from the slum. The children explain that they are selling luminous moss. Severin explains that this is a magical plant that glows in the dark, though he privately wonders what use it could have. Franz doesn't care about its use and declares that he still wants it, excitedly asking to buy 3 of them. Severin agrees, saying sure, and suggests they go ahead and buy it. Severin observes that Franz bought 3 items and correctly guesses that one is a souvenir for their grandfather. Franz happily confirms this, adding that he wants to give his grandfather the one that looks like a horseshoe. He is so excited about his very first purchase, pointing out his choices to the shopkeeper and shouting that it's amazing. The child vendor, realizing Franz is a noble, quickly tries to switch to formal language. The purchased items are shown, and Franz mentally notes that the dog-shaped one is his, while the cat-shaped one is for someone else. Later, Franz and Severin arrive at Prince Raphael's location, and Franz thanks him for the invitation. Prince Raphael welcomes Franz and also greets Severin, remarking that it has been a while. They are all there because they received an invitation from the prince to watch Prince Lionel's match together. It is explained that Prince Lionel is the first prince and he trains regularly in case a war breaks out and he is required to join. While sitting in the stands overlooking the crowded arena, Prince Raphael turns to Franz and tells him that he finally did it. Franz looks back, confused, so the prince explains, blushing a little, that he told his brother he was cool. Franz lights up and asks how it went. Prince Raphael reports that his brother was surprised at first but did thank him for the compliment. He then adds with a hint of sadness that he did not get a kiss. Prince Raphael continues his story, explaining that instead of a kiss, his brother pet his head. Franz seems delighted by this outcome, clasping his hands and thinking that a head pat is also great. Just then, Prince Raphael's attention snaps to the arena, and he tells Franz that the next challenger is his brother. Franz is completely shocked and blurts out, "Brother Stefan?" Down in the arena, Stefan is shown smiling confidently as he adjusts his glove. Prince Raphael explains that this was a recent development, as they had run into Stefan while shopping. The knights who were there encouraged Stefan, telling him he should show his valiant figure to his little brothers. This motivated Stefan to hurriedly join the prince's match. Severin leans over to Franz and confesses that they kept it a secret because Stefan wanted to surprise him. As they watch, both Franz and Prince Raphael are completely mesmerized. Franz screams about how cool it is, and Prince Raphael agrees, whispering that his brother is also so cool. Down in the arena, the crowd roars as the two opponents, Stefan and Prince Lionel, face each other on horseback, ready to charge. The match begins as Prince Lionel and Stefan charge at each other, their swords clashing. Franz watches from the stands with his fists clenched, completely absorbed in the intense fight. As the crowd erupts in screams and cheers, Severin suddenly hugs an overwhelmed Franz from behind and asks, "Wasn't he really cool?" Franz, blushing with excitement, just shouts, "WH," and "That was great." Nearby, Prince Raphael quietly asks if Stefan won. Severin confirms it, telling Franz that his brother Stefan was indeed the winner. Franz, overjoyed, waves his hands and shouts for his brother Stefan. Prince Raphael stares dreamily at the arena, sighing about how cool and magnificent his brother was. Franz observes the prince's reaction and thinks to himself that the prince has an even worse case of brother worship than he does. Franz is thinking that he will probably head home whenever Severin says it's time to go, when he suddenly realizes he's forgetting something important. At that moment, Prince Raphael walks over to say he is going home and asks if Franz will stay. Franz remembers, shouts, "Ah, Your Highness," and holds out the gift he purchased. He explains that it is a souvenir, an ornament he bought in town that is supposed to light up in the dark. The prince looks surprised by the gesture. Prince Raphael accepts the horseshoe-shaped gift and thanks Franz, but he then asks why Franz bought it for him. Franz is taken aback by the question. He inwardly reflects that in his past life, he always brought snacks to share when meeting friends. He had simply followed that same logic, buying a souvenir for the prince because he considers him a friend. The prince simply replies, "Did I see?" This quiet response sends Franz into an internal panic, as he worries that treating a prince like a regular friend was a terrible mistake, perhaps even blasphemy. Just as Franz starts to backtrack and apologize, Prince Raphael speaks at the exact same time. The prince interprets the gift as a thank you for calling Franz his best friend. Franz is mortified that their words overlapped. Prince Raphael then bids him farewell, saying, "Then till we meet another day," and quickly walks away. Franz is left stunned, internally shouting about whether he actually said the word friends out loud and if he's safe. He decides to just assume everything is fine. Severin then joins him, praising him for giving the gift and suggesting they look at other attractions. Franz agrees, but as they walk, his brow furrows as he spots a bard playing music nearby. Franz continues to stare at the bard, and Severin asks if he is curious about him. This sparks a memory for Franz, who realizes, that's it. Bard. He recalls that in the video game, the bard becomes one of the hero's comrades. Franz remembers his past life, seeing the bard on his game screen. He had wondered if the bard was a romanceable character, feeling that if he was, he would have been Franz's favorite. He also recalls that the bard's role was to use his music to cast enhancement magic, or buffs, on the hero. However, Franz never actually recruited him as a teammate because he didn't really get how to use buffs. As the bard poses stylishly, Franz remembers the twist. The bard wasn't a romance character, and Franz couldn't get him as a teammate, all because he didn't realize at first that the bard was actually a man. Franz blushes and thinks, ugh, concluding that this past life confusion and initial crush is what's making him feel so awkward right now. As he's lost in thought, a large gloved hand suddenly covers his eyes from behind. A voice asks if the voice he heard came from Franz. The hand moves, revealing a smiling Stefan, and Franz happily exclaims, "Big brother Stefan." Stefan, still in his festival armor, leans down to Franz and asks him what's wrong, and also asks if Franz saw his match. Severin leans in as well, chuckling, and asks Stefan if he got embarrassed. Franz just looks up at Stefan in total awe, barely able to say that yes. He thinks to himself that his big brother looked like a hero from a fairy tale, and that he's so cool it's making him nervous. Severin watches this exchange and chuckles, thinking to himself that Franz also has the symptoms of being completely starstruck by his brother. Franz has a sudden realization. He smiles and thinks about the luminous moss he bought at the night festival. He considers it his new secret weapon, believing that as long as he has it, he no longer needs to be afraid. He recalls that the moss can glow in the dark, which will solve his problem with the secret passage the hero used, a passage that started bright but then turned pitch black. He immediately tries out his plan, entering the dark passage and holding the moss, laughing that it is no longer a problem to walk through. His joy is short-lived, however, as he lets out a loud scream, realizing in frustration that the moss only glows very faintly, just in his hand. Sometime later, Franz is seen huddled on a bench outdoors, looking cold. A young man with dark hair, Treiskuen, approaches him holding a cloth. Treiskuen notes that Franz's nose is a mess from the cold and asks if he has been sitting there for a long time. He also asks if Franz was cold and jokingly wonders if he no longer has a job, to which Franz replies from the bench that he does still have a job. Treiskuen admits he didn't know when Franz would arrive but just got used to waiting for him. When Franz asks if he always waits, Treiskuen simply says, "Yeah." Treiskuen then drapes a garment over Franz's head to warm him up, explaining he just returned from a hunt. Franz internally notes that he has never actually seen Treiskuen hunt anything. The two of them then walk to the city gate to look around. Franz looks amazed at the large walls surrounding the city and the many carriages passing through. As they walk, a woman warns Treiskuen that the more important thing to worry about is a person named Arthur. She explains that the city is so busy with extra presents and goods because the new saintess is scheduled to be chosen soon. This news makes Franz very anxious, as he knows the hero is also in this city and he worries about what will happen. He thinks the saintess is being chosen a few years earlier than in the game, meaning she will be a powerful ally for the hero when they meet. The woman continues her warning, saying Arthur seems to be planning something and keeps asking questions about the castle, and she cautions Treiskuen to be careful. The woman reassures Treiskuen that she is also keeping an eye on Arthur, so he doesn't need to worry so much. Treiskuen, however, defends Arthur, saying that although that guy is weird, he is not a bad person. This defense sends Franz into a panic. He thinks to himself, "I know that, because he knows Arthur is the hero, the very one who upholds justice and will eventually strike down all the evil aristocrats." This makes Franz worry, wondering if Treiskuen thinks he is a bad person, or even an evil aristocrat. He frets that although he has been trying hard to be a good person, he isn't confident in himself. Treiskuen scoffs at the idea, telling Franz there is no way a kid with such a round and fluffy face could be a bad person. He points out that Franz's servants take proper care of him, his family worried about him when his skin was rough, and most importantly, Franz had saved him. Hearing this, Franz looks up with a warm, blushing face. Treiskuen then gently squishes both of Franz's cheeks, telling him he worries about the weirdest things. Franz, surprised, smiles and thinks to himself that he is happy. Franz continues to stare up at Treiskuen. He thinks about how Treiskuen never says his name, knowing it's partly because they are out in public. Franz then quietly asks him to please say his name, even if it's just in a soft voice. Instead of answering, Treiskuen just says, "Ah," and adjusts Franz's hood, pointing out that it is about to fall off. Then, Treiskuen suddenly grabs Franz's hand and says, "Let's go." Franz is surprised but happily follows, calling out his name. The story notes that it is now the end of the year, and Franz reflects on how busy everyone in the city and his own family has been. Back in his home, Franz looks out the window, noting how quiet it is today. He is suddenly overjoyed to see that it is snowing. A maid explains that snow rarely falls in the Empire and that this is the first time it has piled up like this since Franz was born. Franz excitedly asks if he can go outside to make a snowman. The maid confirms he can, explaining that Lord Stefan thought it would be a good experience for him, since he had never touched snow before. Franz is bundled into a very heavy winter jacket and immediately complains that it's so heavy he can't run. The maid agrees and advises him to just walk within the manor grounds. As he walks with the maid, Franz feels that he has been acting too much on his instincts recently and makes a resolution to get himself together and be a good kid. He enters the dining room but is shocked to find it completely empty. The maid explains that everyone had already left at dawn to prepare for an upcoming ceremony. Franz sits alone at the head of the long, empty table, sighing that if it's for the ceremony, it can't be helped. Just then, a chef arrives with a smile, announcing that for dessert, they have prepared a traditional pie. The chef presents the dish, calling it mince pie. Franz thinks the pie looks delicious. The chef adds that it is a great day to celebrate because today is the day the new saintess is appearing in the imperial capital. Franz is completely shocked by this news. He had a feeling this might be the case, but he is stunned it is actually happening today. The chef explains that all citizens celebrate this day by eating mince pie, even if they cannot go to church. Franz feels torn, but the pie smells too good, so he takes a bite. He is pleasantly surprised. He thought it would be like pound cake, but it is much more moist and filled with dry fruits, which he finds delicious. He decides that even though the saintess has appeared earlier than he expected, it doesn't really matter as long as he doesn't have to meet her, especially since the celebration food is so good. Later, Franz is in his room, feeling full but not at all sleepy. He thinks about the saintess and the special ceremony to announce her. Realizing he might never get another chance to witness this event, he decides that even though it's scary, he should try to take a peek. He puts on his jacket, noting the cold, and runs outside into the snow, thinking it's fun. Seeing that no one is around, he heads for the secret passage at the back of the villa's storeroom. Inside the passage, he is shocked to see the hero. He panics, wondering why the hero is actually inside his house. Suddenly, a bright light flashes and someone shouts, "Watch out!" Franz yells, "Whoa!" But in the next moment, the figure is gone. Confused, Franz bumps into someone and looks up, only to be shocked again to see Treize-kun. Treize-kun looks down, apologizing, "My bad," and asking if Franz is okay. Franz, still being held by him, can only ask in confusion why he is there. Franz confronting Treize-kun in the secret passage, demanding to know what he is doing in his house. A hesitant Treize-kun explains that he had seen Arthur, the hero, entering a church and decided to follow him, which somehow led him to this very spot. Outside, they examine the ground, where Franz observes 2 sets of footprints in the snow. This causes Treize-kun to remember the hero. Franz, however, spots traces of magic and becomes excited, declaring that it is definitely the hero's magic and that he intends to follow them. Treize-kun tries to stop him, warning that it is dangerous and that the magic is already vanishing. Franz insists, claiming he can see magic and is able to track them even if the footprints disappear. Treize-kun relents and agrees to go with him. Franz immediately dashes off, and they follow the magical trail until it seems to stop at a large vase. Franz wonders if the magic went underneath it, while Treize-kun looks up, questioning if they climbed the wall. As Franz touches the vase, a blinding flash of light suddenly envelopes both of them. They are instantly transported into a grand, pillared hallway. A disoriented Franz wonders where they are. They are spotted by a man with long dark hair, whom Franz immediately recognizes and calls "Teacher." The teacher, looking surprised, addresses Franz as Franz-sama. The teacher demands to know why Franz is at the castle, which also confirms their location for Treize-kun. Franz begins to panic internally, realizing they must have accidentally followed the hero's teleportation magic. He worries that he has not only gotten himself involved but has dragged Treize-kun into the mess as well. The teacher is suspicious, stating that all of the castle's important figures should be at the church for the selection of the new saintess. He explains that he only came to investigate after sensing an abnormal magical energy and asks if Franz was the one who used it. Before Franz can answer, Treize-kun interrupts, questioning why an important person like the teacher is at the castle instead of the inauguration ceremony. The teacher dismisses the event as inefficient. Treize-kun then turns to Franz, asking why he transferred them there. A nervous Franz stammers that they just appeared after he touched the vase at his home. This shocks the teacher, who realizes they must have teleported directly from the mansion. Their conversation is cut short by a loud boom that shakes the castle. Startled, the teacher identifies the sound as coming from the throne room. He orders Franz and his friend to stay put and dashes off to investigate. Franz, however, instantly recognizes the hero's magic. His mind connects the castle, the hero, and the explosion, leading him to believe the last boss battle from his game knowledge is happening. shouting that it has completely started. He ignores the teacher's order and runs after him, saying he is just going to check it out. In the throne room, Arthur and a companion are in the middle of a fight against a dark, spreading mass of magical energy. Arthur's ally exclaims that their attack wasn't enough, but Arthur shouts back that it's not over and they must attack one more time. Franz then bursts into the room, followed by his teacher, shouting about Demon King subjugation. He thinks back to the game, remembering that the throne room is where the hero is supposed to defeat the emperor who has been possessed by the Demon King. He looks around, confused, and notes that the emperor isn't there. Trisquin, panting as he catches up, explains that Franz is panting because he ran off so suddenly. He then clarifies that the emperor is, of course, at the church for the Saintess's Advent ceremony. As Arthur and his group continue to battle the ominous magic, Trisquin decides to postpone explanations and cooperate with them. The battle is not going well. The teacher and his allies are struggling. One of them says there is no end in sight, while another panics, asking if they should flee or call for backup. Franz watches in terror, worried they might lose. He wants the Demon King defeated but doesn't want his teacher or the others to get hurt. He tries to run forward, but Trisquin grabs him, telling him to wait. Desperate, Franz pulls out the luminous moss he bought at the festival. It begins to glow brightly, and the light catches Arthur's attention. Seizing the opportunity, Arthur shouts, "Now," and his group unleashes a powerful, combined attack. As the smoke clears, Arthur and his companion wonder if they were successful. Franz, ignoring the battle's outcome, turns anxiously toward Trisquin, whose hands are now faintly glowing. Franz asks why he is lit up, and Trisquin sheepishly says he made a mistake, but that the glow will fade soon. A mysterious voice then comments that the barrier was keyed off, but that the seal was successfully reapplied, concluding that it's fine since it worked. Suddenly, Arthur collapses from exhaustion. His companions rush to his side, but the bard checks him and reports that he is fine. He has just run out of magic and needs to rest. The teacher, however, looks at the unconscious hero and says that this is bad. At that moment, the sound of clanging armor is heard. The teacher identifies it as the Imperial Guards. The bard panics, worrying he will be arrested. As the group looks around the destroyed room, they also notice the Emperor's throne is missing. Just as the guards burst in shouting, the teacher grabs everyone and teleports them away. They reappear in a messy, book-filled room, which the bard introduces as his room at the magic agency's accommodations. The teacher apologizes for the mess, saying it was the only place he could think of. Arthur is laid on a bed, fast asleep. The teacher then turns to Franz and Trisquin, demanding an explanation. After they explain, the bard asks if that entity was truly the Demon King. The teacher says that, given its eeriness, he would agree it was. Franz looks at the sleeping Arthur, thinking about how he came to the castle so early and already managed to deal with the Demon King. He concludes that Arthur is a truly amazing person. Franz then asks Trisquin if he is tired from glowing. Trisquin brushes it off, saying he didn't do much and is just glad that Franz is safe. He then asks the teacher if Franz can go home now. The teacher agrees, offering to send Franz back to the mansion with his magic. Franz looks surprised and asks, "Only me?" The teacher explains that new problems will arise if Franz, a member of a ducal family, doesn't return soon. He adds that they still need to hear Trisquin's story to decide what to do next. As Franz prepares to leave, he thanks Trisquin for coming with him and says he'll see him again. Just before he teleports, Trisquin calls out to him, patting his head and calling him a good boy. Franz is sent back, reappearing in the snowy passage alone. He feels a little lonely. He is happy no one was injured, but he wishes that he could have been strong too. Focusing on Arthur's adventure, he explains that he woke up one day to find he had been turned into a baby. He immediately understood his situation and realized he had been reincarnated. Arthur reflects on his previous life, noting he had just made his college debut after being a loner in high school. He was finally getting used to the public when he was reincarnated, but he enjoyed his new life as well. At 4 years old, he tried to use his magic and it leaked out uncontrollably, revealing he had an insane amount of power. His worried mother asked if he could control it. Because he caused a disturbance in the spirit forest near his village, he was put under house arrest. He assured his mother it was fine, as the spirits had taught him control in his dreams, and he now felt his ability was perfect. He remembered playing a game in his past life called War Chronicles of Ascalon Impure, which he was a very passionate otaku about. The appearance of the spirit in his dream convinced him of his new reality. He understood that his new role was that of the hero. The game's plot involved the hero's village burning down, after which he would miraculously survive and be taught magic by the spirits. Young Arthur is shown running with determination, deciding he must first become the spirit's apprentice and vowing that he would not let his village burn. He thinks this is an amazing role, particularly because he dislikes stories where people die. Thanks to the spirits teaching him, he feels he can use his new, cheat abilities to eliminate the cause of the disaster and achieve a result where no one gets hurt. As he is thinking this, he encounters someone. A young boy appears, and Arthur is shocked because the boy had no presence at all. Arthur proclaims that he has something he must do. He introduces himself as Arthur, a hero from his incredibly kind village, and he pleads with the boy not to turn his home into a battlefield. The boy is confused and asks what battlefield Arthur is referring to. Arthur internally recognizes the boy as Stefan Dux Triena, the oldest son of the ducal family, and gets excited even though they are supposed to be enemies. Arthur explains his worry, stating that the presence of soldiers in his village is unsettling. Stefan seems surprised by this and asks if a villager was the one who told him that. Arthur proudly boasts that he is a hero loved by the spirits, which is how he knows everything. Stefan asks how he got past the guard, and Arthur explains that he used stealth magic taught to him by the spirits. Stefan, wondering if Arthur has any proper teachers, simply pats his head, tells him to sleep more so he can grow taller, and has him sent back to his village. The narration explains that 2 days later, a fire did occur, but it was a different arson attack from the one in the game's story. Later, Arthur is seen riding in a wagon. He thinks that even though his village is safe, the Demon King must still exist. He decides he needs to find his team members. He believes the Demon King is not yet at full power, and he specifically wants to recruit the Bard. His plan is to use the Bard's strengthening magic, or buffs, to enhance his own power so he can seal the Demon King. He then overhears people mentioning that one can meet the Emperor by going to the church. Arthur learns from a villager that the new Saintess is appearing early, which means the Emperor will be going to church for the first time in a long time. He internally praises this pro-level source of information. This gives Arthur an idea. With the castle empty, he has a perfect window of opportunity. He believes that if he can defeat the Demon King before they fully awaken, he can prevent all the future battles and suffering caused by its influence. He decides this is the best possible outcome. Arthur sneaks into the castle, but when he reaches the throne room, he is shocked to find it is empty. He is motivated by his desire to avoid stories where people die. Guards are in the room, wondering about a holy power they are sensing. Just then, the teacher arrives, introducing herself as Arnica Noir from the Magic Agency. She explains that she felt an abnormal magical power and came to investigate. She confirms to the guards that she can feel an incredible holy magic power filling the entire room. Internally, she thinks to herself that she must steer this story carefully and that the key is to mumble the last part. The guards are in an uproar. They speculate that the Saintess's prayer must have destroyed some evil, as they are in the middle of her investiture ceremony. They conclude the holy power must be from the Saintess. One guard pieces together the story they've been told, that the boy is the hero from a fairy tale. He snuck into the audience chamber while the Emperor was away, and he sealed an abnormal magic power in the castle's basement. Another guard finds the story hard to believe but admits he cannot call it a lie. The Bard, who is also present, decides it is best to stay quiet. Arnica lets the guards believe their Saintess theory, while she privately considers the repulsiveness she felt from the entity and decides that if it was the Demon King, she must report it to the Empire. Arnica breathes a sigh of relief as the guards leave, convinced it was the Saintess miracle. She concludes that things will now calm down. Her next step is to casually mention the connection between the black haze Franz had seen and the Demon King to His Excellency, Duke Triena. She looks over at Triskun holding Franz, thinking that she must protect Franz. This is why she cannot talk about them, as it would mean revealing the Triena family's secret. The next morning, Franz cheerfully runs up to his brothers, greeting both Stefan and Severin. Severin greets him in return. Franz is surprised to see Stefan, asking why he isn't at the castle. Stefan explains that he has returned to give a report to their father. Stefan clarifies that the castle stay was just a pretense. He was actually worried about Franz. He asks if anything weird happened, since Franz was alone all night. A nervous Franz stammers, "No." He then quickly insists he was perfectly fine, full of energy, and even took a nap. Severin looks at him for a moment, asking if nothing really happened. He then says he is relieved if Franz is okay. Franz, who has to keep his castle visit a secret, wonders what they are so worried about. Severin explains that a large amount of magical power was generated at the castle yesterday, and he was concerned it might have affected Franz. Stefan adds that the black miasma Franz had seen before has now disappeared, and he asks Franz if he feels sluggish. Franz confirms that he is all right. Hearing this, Severin internally reflects that his anxiety is melting away, knowing that Franz won't have to go near anything dangerous anymore. Franz looks up and declares with conviction that he is feeling all right. He hugs Severin and promises that he will not go near anything dangerous. He lists all the people he cares about: his father, Kitty, the chef, his teacher, and his brothers, Severin and Stefan. He vows that he will make sure none of them get in danger, either. Stefan and Severin look on as Franz makes his declaration. Stefan remarks on how promising Franz sounds, while Franz himself looks very determined. Sometime later, Franz has secretly gone to town again. He is sitting on a bench in a park, frowning at his loose shoelace. He is surprised to find that Arthur is also there. Arthur is looking at his shoe, identifying the knot as a flower knot. Triskuin, who is also with them, explains to Arthur that it is called a flower knot because the final shape resembles a flower and that it is currently very popular in the imperial capital. Arthur seems unimpressed, mentioning that he only knows the double figure 8 knot, which is a sturdy rope knot. Suddenly, Arthur gets an idea, exclaiming that they should write this new knot down. He eagerly asks Franz to show him how to do it, and Franz agrees. They all attempt to tie the knot, but the shoelace becomes a tangled mess. Triskuin tries to trace the path, but he admits it doesn't make sense. He even draws a diagram. Arthur declares he is clueless. Franz, watching this, just sighs and thinks maybe he should go home with his shoe untied. But Arthur suddenly jumps up, declaring that they cannot give up, or the battle will be over. Arthur suggests they redraw the blueprint for the knot. After more effort, he finally shouts that it is done. As Triskuin warns Arthur that pulling one string will make it come loose, Arthur excitedly tells Franz to pull on a different part. After all their effort, Franz suddenly feels that Arthur is more like a friend. He immediately gasps, correcting himself with the thought that Arthur is the hero, and he is the villain. Arthur, however, is celebrating their success and calls Franz Ak-kun. This makes Franz feel glum, and he denies the friendship to himself, feeling embarrassed about the nickname. Arthur then asks Franz if he also thinks they have become good friends. Franz, trying to maintain his villain persona, tells Arthur he is free to refer to him by a nickname. Arthur, reverting to his samurai-style speech, enthusiastically confirms, "Of course, Degazaro." This genuine response surprises Franz, who stammers, "Ah, really?" Arthur enthusiastically grabs Franz's hand. Franz laughs, feeling happy that he can call Arthur by his name, and the narration confirms a new friend was made. Franz thinks that even though they might become enemies in the future, it's okay for now. Arthur just smiles and asks what the problem could be. A very energetic Franz greeting the day, and a maid wishes him a good morning in return, calling him young master. Franz introduces himself, stating his name is Franz Dux Triena, the 6-year-old third son of a ducal family, and he is still trying his best to be a good boy. He peeks from behind a wall, reflecting that it has been 2 weeks since he went to the castle, and thankfully, nobody seems to know. He is, however, distressed, as he feels he was one of the people responsible for the destruction of the emperor's seat. He worries that this incident is adding to his bad kid points. Franz recalls that he remembered his past life as a high school student last spring and realized he has been reborn into the world of the game, War Chronicles of Ascalon Empire. He knows his Triena family is one of the strongest in the empire, and his father is nearly as powerful as the final boss. His brothers are cool knights who can fight with both swords and magic. Franz is aware that in the game's original story, which starts in about 10 years, his family would have become bad aristocrats. This was because the empire was trying to destroy the world, and the noble families, including his, were also causing problems. Franz remembers his own role in the game was that of a mid-level boss. In that story, he acted selfishly, caused trouble, and was high and mighty, only to be beaten by the hero every time. Now, in this new life, he reflects that while they did destroy the seat, the dark haze seems to have vanished. He also feels he has grown a little closer to the hero, Ak-kun. He is filled with hope, believing that as long as he becomes a good boy, fate, God, or even the hero will spare him. Feeling cheerful, Franz dances and sings his way down a hall. He runs into his big brother, Stefan, who greets him and remarks that he seems to be in a good mood. Franz is immediately embarrassed that Stefan saw his antics, and he shyly explains he was just very happy because he heard they might get to eat breakfast together, since Stefan is home. Stefan smiles, picks him up, and tells Franz that he is also happy to be eating with him. As Stefan carries him to the dining room, he mentions that Franz really seems to love apple pie. Franz enthusiastically agrees, describing how yummy, sweet, and juicy he finds it. Stefan chuckles, saying that watching Franz eat it so happily makes him want to eat it as well. This declaration sends Franz into a flurry of excitement. He immediately starts shouting orders for the chef, requesting a special apple pie for Stefan that isn't too sweet. He also suggests adding the brown stuff for a more mature taste and making sure there are plenty of apples, while Stefan just asks him to calm down. Stefan then recalls that Franz was practically raised on apples and that he'd heard Franz never ate monster meat as a baby. Franz confirms this, and Stefan agrees that the apple pie is indeed good. While eating, Stefan mentions that Franz is now 7 years old and that it is probably time to throw a party for him. He clarifies that this isn't a simple birthday celebration, but a formal aristocratic party, usually held in the spring for children who are 7 or 8. This party serves as a first step for building future connections. Franz, hearing this, just thinks that aristocrats have it rough. Stefan continues, explaining that the party is also a good time to assess the factions of other families. Then he drops a bombshell. It will also be necessary to select a betrothed for Franz. Franz is stunned, stammering the word, betrothed. He has a terrifying flashback to his brother Severin's tea party, where he saw many beautiful ladies. He then recalls the image of those same ladies getting into a vicious fight. Franz has a horrifying realization. They were fighting like that because they all wanted to marry Severin. The thought of being forced into a blood-spilled marriage with one of those ladies makes Franz feel dizzy and start to spin. He panics, thinking that he has never even held hands with anyone, not even in his past life, and now he has to face this at such a young age. The terror becomes too much and Franz screams, "I don't want to have the part." He collapses, looking pale and scared. His brothers, Stefan and Severin, rush to his side, asking what is wrong and shouting for a doctor, realizing this is a serious problem. Franz shouting with all his heart as he flails his arms, his family reassures him, saying, "No, we won't throw a party," and that they understand him. They offer to carry the distressed child back to his room. A few days after this tantrum incident, Franz is shown doing much better. He is now happily riding on the shoulders of the elderly gardener, with a maid nearby. The chapter is titled, Birthday Foreshadowing. While enjoying his garden walk, Franz points ahead and exclaims to the gardener, whom he calls Grandpa, that the flowers over there look like they will bloom soon. He reflects that there are always new things to discover in the garden, with various new flowers blooming since his last visit. He finds it all a lot of fun because the gardener grandpa tells him about all the different plants. For instance, the gardener points out the Pyrus japonica, which Franz notes looks similar to the lily of the valley. Still on the gardener's shoulders, Franz looks puzzled as he notices everyone in the household seems to be busy and rushing around. He thinks that it looks like they are holding a party, which confuses him because he was sure Stefan had cancelled his party. As he wonders what's going on, his maid, Kitty, approaches him. She asks the young master what his favorite flower is, or at least what color of flower he likes. Franz first repeats her question, color, and then thoughtfully ponders, color of flower, huh? Franz gives it a moment and then replies that he loves all of the flowers in the garden because they are all very cute. Kitty seems happy with this answer. Franz elaborates, saying he finds the flowers pretty, whether many are blooming all at once or even if just one is blooming by itself. Later, Franz is inside and smells a nice aroma, which he identifies as butter. He follows the scent and finds Kitty, who is smiling. Franz thanks the gardener, Grandpa, for his time, and Kitty, looking honored, explains that the chefs are putting all their effort into making special desserts. As Franz walks along, he starts to think, and all the confusing pieces begin to come together. He recalls seeing the staff looking busy, as if preparing for a party, and he remembers Kitty's strange question about his favorite flower. He then has a sudden realization. He flashes back to the day of his tantrum, remembering that after he shouted, "No," to the big party, he also said that a party with only his family, his father, Severin and Stefan, would be better. He blurts out, "Really?" and a text bubble confirms, "You are correct." Franz is overjoyed, exclaiming, "Oh wow," as he finally understands that all of this preparation is for his own birthday. It is going to be a special birthday party with just his family. Franz is ecstatic, realizing that the reason everyone was so busy, why the maids were asking about flowers in the garden, and why he smelled the delicious scent of butter was all for his birthday party. The next morning, Franz's eyes pop open wide. He is so excited that he's already wide awake and out of bed when the maids come to wake him. He greets them all loudly, and they wish him good morning, noting that he woke up very early today. Franz just puffs up, smiling proudly. He happily declares that it's his birthday. As he gets dressed, he peeks out from a doorway, wondering if everyone has come home for the celebration. A maid informs him that his father, His Grace, and young Lord Stefan both returned late last night. Franz then thinks about his other brother, Severin. He knows Severin has been studying hard to become a knight and is currently staying with his mentor. Franz silently hopes that Severin can make it back so they can all celebrate together. Two maids then help Franz into his special birthday outfit, gushing that it's all for the young master's birthday. Franz looks at himself and notes, it's quite frilly. Kitty explains that she had wanted to prepare an attire with even more decorations, but the butler had stepped in. The butler's reasoning was, since it's just among family, let's keep it at that. Franz, hearing this, thinks to himself, good job, butler, as he has a funny mental image of himself as a bizarre, overly frilled creature if Kitty had her way. The maids all admire his very dignified appearance, calling him a perfect Triena noble son. They even say that when people in the capital talk about the fashionable prince, they must be referring to him. Franz, hearing this high praise, just stammers it. He spins around to look at his back, but the compliments suddenly make him panic. He has a dark vision of himself and wonders, was that the villainous me? He immediately resolves that he must become a good kid that's not conceited. Just as he's having this internal crisis, Kitty informs him that breakfast is all set. With his excitement returning, Franz cheers, yes, and runs forward, his heart full of excitement as his birthday finally begins, an excited Franz exclaiming, whoa, because it is his birthday today. He enters the dining room, where his father and his brother Stefan are already present and wish him a good morning. Franz is amazed to see two apple pies, thinking they look both amazing and stylish. He looks around but confirms that his brother Severin is not there, just as he had expected. Franz is still happy, as he knows that having both his father and Stefan in the same room is a rare event, but he quietly wishes that Severin could be there as well. Just as his father is about to begin the celebration, Stefan calls out to him. Franz is startled as the dining room door swings open. Severin has arrived, and he apologizes for being late. While Stefan welcomes him, an overjoyed Franz shouts, "Brother Severin," and welcomes him back home. Severin walks up to Franz, petting his head as he apologizes again. He explains his tardiness, saying a tree had fallen, and they were forced to take a detour to avoid the cleanup. With the entire family now together, Franz's father proposes a toast, blessing his son's continued health. Stefan tells Franz he is happy that Franz was born into the Triena family, and Severin adds his thanks. Franz, looking at all of them, thanks everyone for being there. He then exclaims that he is very glad to have been born into this house and that he loves everyone. Later, Franz meets with Treiskun. Having been in the dark passage, Franz now thinks Treiskun looks especially radiant and sparkling out in the open. Treiskun asks Franz what's wrong and how he has been, checking if he has experienced any physical changes. Franz assures him that his body is fine, and Treiskun replies that this is good. Franz then cautiously asks about the aftermath of the big explosion, specifically wondering about the Emperor and his chair. Treiskun explains that the chair is okay. He says the higher-ups decided to create a cover story by mixing truth with lies. They concealed the fact that Arthur and the others had intruded, as it would have been too troublesome otherwise. The entire incident is now being referred to as the Saintess Miracle. Treiskun details the official story. A child guided by the Holy Spirit was found during a patrol. This child led them to the remains of the Demon King, and the resulting confrontation led to the destruction of the Emperor's chair and the sealing of the Demon King's remains. Treiskun points out that this story conveniently erases his and Franz's involvement and that the matter is now a national secret. Franz looks worried, wondering if this is really okay, and mentions his teacher. Treiskun reassures him that it is fine, as this was the explanation provided by the person from the magic agency, the teacher, and the bard. When Franz asks if Treiskun got into trouble, he admits, pretty much, but adds that at least nobody knew he was at the castle. Treiskun then admits to Franz that he was worried about him. He says, "I see. Good," explaining that he was unable to follow Franz when he was sent away from the castle. Franz blushes and says that it would be nice if they could celebrate together, now that the Demon King has been sealed. He then nuzzles against Treize-kun's side like a purring cat. A flustered Treize-kun tells him that is difficult, as their social positions are too different. Franz climbs onto Treize-kun's lap, thanks him, and says he is happy that he was able to meet him. Treize-kun just says, "I see." Franz then says he wants to be like Treize-kun, which gets a surprised, "Oh." Franz clenches Treize-kun's shirt, gritting his strong front teeth. Treize-kun then remembers something and pulls out a pouch, which he gives to Franz. He explains they are flower seeds he found in the forest. He says they only bloom every few years and are said to bring good luck if they do. Franz looks at the seeds, thinking they are beautiful. Treize-kun asks Franz to tell him when the flowers bloom. He then looks at Franz and softly says, "Franz, I think you're a good boy." Franz is visibly moved. He clutches the seeds, thinking that even though Treize-kun doesn't know it's his birthday, he feels like he has received many presents, and this feeling is the best. Overwhelmed with happiness, Franz launches himself at Treize-kun, hugging him tightly. He exclaims, "Thank you so much, I love you Treize-kun," and promises that they will grow the flowers together. A surprised Treize-kun just says, "Oh," as Franz holds on. A perfect sunny day, and Franz is excited to be going on a picnic with his friends. He calls out to his friends, Hearts-kun and Sagami-kun, encouraging them to climb just a bit more, as they make their way up a hill. The three friends are seen huffing and puffing as they walk up the hill. Franz explains that he wanted to see the flowers, so they got off the carriage a bit early, and he also notes that they all need more exercise. Upon reaching their spot, Franz joyfully shouts, "We're here," and immediately starts rolling around on the blanket. Hearts-kun suggests they rest for now, warning that they will get tired if they keep standing. He then tells a hesitant Sagami-kun, "Let's lie down," and Sagami agrees. Franz, meanwhile, declares that this is a picnic, so everyone can do what they want. All three boys lie down on the blanket, enjoying the nice weather. Hearts-kun remarks that it feels good to accomplish something, and Sagami-kun agrees, saying everyone worked hard. Franz yawns and thanks his friends, saying he was only able to make the climb because of them. Sometime later, Hearts-kun wakes up with a startle, realizing they all fell asleep. As he tries to wake the others, Sagami-kun jolts awake and immediately starts bowing low in apology. Sagami-kun is very sorry, explaining that as a servant, he should not have fallen asleep even if they were there to play. Franz and Hearts-kun just look at him, confused. Franz, looking exasperated, tells them that they are not his servants. He reminds them that he considers them his confidants or companions. He explains that for buddies, it is perfectly normal to take a nap together or play chase, so they should not apologize. With his arms spread wide, Franz then declares, "Please let's just be friends." He immediately feels embarrassed, thinking he posed like a sushi restaurant owner. Hearts-kun and Sagami-kun look at him for a moment and then nod. They both place their hands over his, and Sagami-kun says, "Franz-sama will always be by your side." Sagami-kun then slides his hand away, and he and Hearts-kun are seen whispering to each other. They both turn back to Franz and together, they formally say, "Franz-sama, let's be friends." Franz is momentarily surprised. Hearts-kun mentions that both he and Sagami were born in the autumn. Sagami-kun then realizes that this means Franz-sama must be the oldest of the three of them. Hearts-kun thinks this is cool, and Franz beams, thanking them very much. Sagami-kun explains that he and Hearts talked and worked together to get a gift for Franz. He presents silver needle crystals, mithril, which are beautiful gems from his family's Grunblatt territory. Hearts-kun adds that the two of them polished the gems themselves. Franz is amazed by this and thinks they are super pretty. Hearts-kun then gives his gift, a potpourri made from flowers called Thousand Days Ruby. He explains they were harvested from his Lippet family territory and have a very nice fragrance. Franz is completely overjoyed, exclaiming that he is so happy. He thanks them both profusely and promises to cherish their gifts. He then decides it's the perfect time to give them something in return by offering them the best hospitality, excitedly shouting, "Let's eat pies." He boasts that today's apple pie is delicious and also presents Hearts-kun's favorite salad and raisin sandwich along with Sagami-kun's favorite fluffy potato pie, while also recommending a cake. Franz reflects on what a wonderful day it was, having a picnic with his friends that lasted all the way until evening. Later, back at his home, his brother Stefan approaches him, holding a letter and informing Franz that it arrived for him. Stefan watches as Franz takes the letter. Franz asks who it's from and reads the sender's name, Mark-Lucian Triena. Franz shouts in excitement, "Grandfather!" And the story ends with him holding the letter, wondering what could be written inside. The story begins with young Master Franz and the silver-haired young Lord Severin arrive home in a carriage and are warmly greeted by a row of smiling maids standing outside the estate. The scene shifts as Severin invites the excited young boy to visit the countryside after receiving a letter from their grandfather, and they continue their journey in a carriage toward a massive stone gate. Franz presses his face against the window to admire the cool guards while Severin explains that they are allowed to pass through this exclusive gate reserved for high-ranking nobles because they are the Triena family heading to their grandfather's territory. The carriage rolls past a dense area that Franz identifies as the feed forest where many monsters live, and he secretly realizes this location is a leveling spot from a game he knows. Severin reassures the worried boy that adventurers and knights, including their brother Stefan, regularly patrol the area to keep it safe for travelers. Franz asks if they are going inside the dangerous woods, and Severin confirms they must pass through it to reach their destination, but comforts him by saying there are few monsters around during the spring. Suddenly Franz spots a small animal on a tree branch, and Severin identifies it as a killer squirrel, though the boy is less scared of the name and more fascinated by its fluffy tail. Severin advises Franz to move back from the window for safety just before the boy spots a pack of small white creatures that look like cute Maltese dogs. Although Franz wants to pet the cute animals, Severin warns him that they are actually kobolds that use charm magic to surround and attack their prey. The tension rises as a giant foot stomps the ground and a massive unicorn rabbit appears to chase the kobolds, while Severin uses the moment to teach Franz that nature has conflicts just like humans do. The travelers eventually arrive at a large mansion where they plan to stay for the night, and Franz becomes visibly upset when he learns they must sleep in separate rooms because the house does not belong to them. As a maid tries to lead the dejected boy down the hallway, Severin notices his sadness and stops him with a gentle proposal. The older brother suggests that if Franz were to accidentally fall asleep in his room, then he would be allowed to stay, and Franz happily agrees that such a situation cannot be helped. The final scene shows the plan worked perfectly as the two brothers are seen sleeping peacefully together in the same large bed at the morning after the stay at the mansion, where young Franz slowly blinks his eyes open to find himself lying in a large bed. Sitting beside him is the silver-haired Severin, who leans in with a gentle smile to ask if the boy is awake before wishing him a warm good morning. Franz is still sleepy and rubs his eyes while greeting his big brother, and he happily recalls that they talked a lot the previous night after he took a short bath and ate dinner until he fell asleep. The conversation shifts to home as Franz enthusiastically describes how he planted a bunch of acorns in the garden hoping they will turn into big trees, while Severin kindly asks to be notified once they sprout. The brothers agree that they had a great time talking and that traveling is amazing, and they make promises about things to do together once they return home. As the journey continues, Severin explains that the feed forest is rich in resources but is also the last place one visits before reaching the imperial capital. He warns that the forest contains very strong monsters but assures Franz that they are safe because they have escort guards protecting them, just as merchants hire adventurers for safety. Franz imagines buying potions and weapons at a shop, but his thoughts are interrupted when the carriage suddenly stops and shakes, causing Severin to apologize and look out the window. Severin notes that the knights have cordoned off the road ahead, and Franz peers out to see the yellow bear knights surrounding a carriage. Severin explains that the knights are arresting slave traders who tried to disguise their captives to avoid recognition. As a criminal is dragged out, Franz looks shaken, prompting Severin to gently place a hand on the boy's shoulder to comfort him while asking if he was scared. Severin uses this moment to teach Franz that the Empire is a great power because they enforce laws strictly and ensure that evil people are caught by the knights. Franz watches a chain gang of prisoners being led away and wonders if their other brother Stefan might be there as well, since he is a knight. Severin clarifies that Stefan is currently with his battalion and cannot be there, but he praises their brother as a wonderful and righteous knight who is indispensable to the Empire. Both brothers admit they want to see him, and they excitedly plan that the next time they meet they will surround him from both sides and shout about how cool he is. They giggle as they imagine hugging him and taking a bath together as a family. The carriage eventually comes to a stop at their destination, and Severin asks the young boy if he is ready to go outside. Franz cheers enthusiastically and hops out of the carriage door with a big smile before he immediately spots an older man in the distance and runs forward while happily shouting for his grandfather to mark their final arrival. Franz, the cheerful protagonist, welcomes readers to the 31st chapter with a bright smile while the translation credits roll on the screen. The story opens with Franz arriving at his grandfather's estate and staring in wide-eyed amazement at the massive house that looks more like a castle than a regular home. His brother Severin stands beside him and gently tells Franz to close his mouth because he is gaping at the impressive building in the country. They are soon greeted by their grandmother, who welcomes Severin warmly and kisses him on the cheeks in a foreign greeting style that reminds Franz of a scene from a movie. Franz feels sudden shyness and hides behind Severin's leg because he does not remember meeting her as a baby despite his past life memories. Severin encourages the boy to step forward, so Franz timidly introduces himself as 7 years old and thanks his grandmother for having them. The grandmother smiles affectionately and holds Franz's face while saying how very nice it is to meet him. Franz notices that she smells nice and realizes that all his nervous feelings have completely disappeared as she invites everyone inside to rest. Later, the group decides to visit the hot springs located at the top of the mountain, and they travel by horse rather than carriage. Franz rides on a horse with his grandfather while Severin follows close behind them. The grandfather asks if Franz is scared, but the boy cheerfully bounces and replies that he is perfectly fine and not intimidated at all. Franz realizes this is the same horse his grandfather rode previously and is touched that his grandfather prepared it specifically because he knew Franz wanted to ride it. The grandfather mumbles shyly into his mustache, confirming this while Franz tries to pronounce the horse's difficult name, which is Ronefelt. As they near their destination, Franz excitedly points out the fluffy white steam rising from the hot springs and happily greets the coachman. He spots the carriage with the maids that arrived earlier, and his grandfather smiles to see Franz having so much fun on the trip. When they reach the entrance, the grandfather tells Franz to go inside and enjoy himself while he attempts to leave. Franz is shocked and pulls hard on his grandfather's coat and hand because he wants them to enter together. Franz pleads that the hot springs are spacious enough for everyone to join and asks his grandfather not to leave. The grandfather, who was actually just being shy, gives in to the request and agrees to go in with them. They enter the bathhouse, where the room is filled with beautiful white steam that amazes Franz. As they soak in the water, Franz sneaks a peek at his grandfather and notices scratches on his body but feels glad that there is no pain associated with them. The grandfather relaxes in the soothing water and thanks Franz for the lovely company. The chapter concludes with the family enjoying their time together as a happy and bountiful spring begins. A final bonus image humorously depicts the grandfather dressed as a Pokemon trainer, while a caption compliments his Charizard. A cheerful and flushed Franz clenching his small fists in excitement as he encourages the reader to enjoy the series, while the translation credits appear beside his adorable face. The scene shifts to the main narrative, where Franz and his brother Severin are riding in a luxurious carriage and looking out the window at the passing landscape. Franz presses his face against the glass in pure amazement as he sees the vast fields and distant mountains, and he asks if his grandfather really rules over all this land all the way to the sea. Severin confirms the territory's massive size, while Franz shouts in awe after realizing the domain truly extends that far. The carriage stops near some fields where the brothers decide to greet a group of workers who are visibly nervous to be in the presence of nobility. One of the workers is so tense that he lets out a stiff and unnatural laugh that sounds more like a spoken phrase than a real chuckle, which Franz notices immediately. Severin bows politely and asks for a moment of their time, which instantly eases the tension and makes the workers feel honored to speak with them. The men explain that they are lumberjacks, and they point out the special trees they are managing, which they call illusion elms. Franz is curious about the name, so the lumberjacks explain that the wood from these trees is of the highest quality and is used specifically for the admiral's ships. They continue to detail how the illusion elm is unique because it can repel magic and withstand great force, which makes it invaluable for the Empire's protection. The workers enthusiastically praise the admiral for his brilliant command and the safety he provides for the seas. Franz happily joins the conversation to agree with them and sweetly shares that his grandfather is also very kind and eats apple pie with him. The atmosphere becomes incredibly warm as the workers are charmed by Franz's innocence and the wholesome story about the admiral. Franz then turns his affection towards Severin and loudly declares that he is rooting for his brother while wrapping his arms around him in a tight hug. The lumberjacks are overwhelmed by the heartwarming display of brotherly love and blush at the adorable sight of Franz giggling and squeezing his brother. Later that afternoon, the scene transitions to a dining room where the brothers are sitting at a table with a noblewoman who asks if they enjoyed their day. Severin mentions that he plans to go watch their grandfather work for the rest of the day, while Franz cheerfully announces that he is going to head to the hot springs. Franz enters the bathhouse and looks incredibly pleased as he slips into the large pool of steaming water. He floats happily in the spacious bath and thinks about how amazing it is to have an infinite supply of hot water that he can enjoy whenever he wants. A maid reminds him to stay away from the windows for his safety, but Franz notices that the usual guards are missing from their posts. He suddenly hears a rustling noise coming from the trees outside the window and gets scared because he thinks a monster might be appearing. He carefully peeks over the edge of the window frame and spots a group of rabbits with horns on their heads gathering in the grass outside. He recognizes the creatures as unicorn rabbits but becomes confused because these ones are brown while the one he saw previously in the feed forest was pitch black. Franz wonders if the darkness of the forest made the previous rabbit appear black and asks if the species comes in different colors. He receives an answer that all unicorn rabbits are naturally brown, which deepens the mystery as the herd hops back into the safety of the woods. Franz feels relieved that the creatures left and tells himself that everything is safe now as he sinks back into the water. He relaxes completely and starts daydreaming about sleeping on a soft futon and eating more delicious apple pie. He feels so comfortable in the warmth that he thinks he could stay in the bath forever, but his expression soon turns serious. He starts thinking critically about the black rabbit he saw earlier and reasons that a brown rabbit would not look black even in the shade. He deduces that the creature must have looked black because of magical power and realizes the only thing that could create that effect is the dangerous black haze. Franz knows he has to report this worrying finding to his big brother, but he dreads the idea because it implies a troublesome connection to the Demon King. He finds the whole situation incredibly annoying and sinks his face underwater to blow bubbles in frustration while deciding to procrastinate on the bad news so he can relax for just a little longer. Franz waking up in his bed feeling groggy and letting out a long groan because he got sick again and did not want to worry anyone. He struggles to get up while thinking deeply that he absolutely needs to tell his brother Severin about the black rabbit of the Demon King that appeared. Franz's imagination takes over as he pictures a terrifying scenario where the forest ends up filled with monsters and he fears that if someone gets hit with the black haze they will become a pile of killing intent. He stands in a large hallway envisioning the Empire turning evil and even his own family becoming villains, which makes him stagger and slump over in despair. His dark thoughts are interrupted when his elegant grandmother appears by the window holding a fan and giggling as she asks him if he slept well. Franz quickly slides across the floor to politely greet her with a cheerful good morning. His grandmother informs him that Severin has already gone out on an inspection tour with her husband and they won't be back until the afternoon. Franz is shocked and disappointed because he wanted to go to his brother's room to talk about the black rabbit immediately. He stands there thinking hard and decides he must remember every detail to tell him later since work cannot be avoided. Seeing him looking lonely, his grandmother kindly smiles and asks if he would like to play with her instead. They talk about a mermaid who became a witch and Franz wonders if she is lonely traveling the seas. He then asks if his grandfather travels often on his ship but learns he is usually too busy with territory work to go out. Grandmother asks what he wants to do next and mentions that Old Lion likes being outside, which surprises Franz since he personally prefers staying indoors. Franz excitedly changes the subject to talk about how cool his big brother Severin was at the knight's tournament. He energetically demonstrates Severin's moves by jumping and hopping around the room like a bunny. He continues to swing his arms and explains how the other knights were amazed by Severin's strength and kindness as his grandmother claps happily for him. Just then his grandfather and Severin return home and his grandmother welcomes them back warmly. She explains that Franz was just recounting the tournament while Severin wipes sweat from his forehead after his hard work. Franz looks up at his brother with admiration, thinking he is the coolest and most relatable person ever. Severin asks for a moment to change clothes and get tea, but he notices Franz tugging on his jacket with a worried expression. Seeing the boy's distress, Severin suggests they sit down and talk immediately. Franz finally reveals that the unicorn rabbit they saw on the way had a black haze on it. He admits he has no proof and is not sure if it is the same curse as the one in the castle, but he felt he needed to say something. Severin leans in to hug Franz and thanks him for sharing the important information. He reassures Franz that even if the rabbit looked normal to others, they will assume it is cursed because Franz saw the blackness. He explains that while the castle curse was unique, natural curses exist but are usually less dangerous. When Franz asks if everyone will become strange again, Severin comforts him by saying most curses just cause fatigue and can be removed by the church. Hearing that they can report this to Brother Stefan later makes Franz shout that it is great and he feels relieved. Severin promises to keep an eye out on the way back and agrees to stay with Franz when the boy asks if they can be together. Severin smiles and says he will play with Franz, who then excitedly suggests going bug hunting. The story pauses with Franz smiling brightly as he realizes he is not alone and feels assured that everything will definitely be okay. The day of departure, Franz reluctantly stands in the courtyard while his older brother Severin gently reminds him that it is high time to board the carriage and return to the capital. Franz looks visibly upset and tearful about leaving as he hesitantly lifts his foot to step onto the carriage because he wishes he could stay longer to catch bugs with his grandfather. The narrative flows into a warm memory where Franz and his grandfather are out in the garden searching for insects, and the grandfather explains that the vibrant spring butterfly they are looking at will change its color to a brown shade once autumn arrives. The grandfather lovingly promises that he will bring Franz his favorite chocolate cake when he visits the capital in late summer so they can drink tea together again. He continues to explain that seeing the butterfly return to its bright color in the spring helps them feel the change of seasons even if the grandmother cannot travel to visit them. Back in the present moment, the grandfather and grandmother stand together in their formal attire to bid the boys farewell as the grandmother graciously says she will wait for their return next year. Severin respectfully bows and asks his grandfather to take good care of their grandmother and his own health before the carriage door closes and the vehicle begins to roll away with a loud clank and rattle. Inside the moving carriage, Franz is overcome with emotion and bursts into tears, but he quickly wipes his eyes because he wants to be strong enough to wave back to the loving figures seeing them off. He resolves to write a letter to his grandparents as soon as they return to the capital while the carriage continues its long journey over roads that have become rough and bumpy due to the falling rain. Severin notices that Franz has woken up from a nap and mentions that they have already left the church where they prayed and passed through the dark and quiet feed forest without sensing anything unusual. Severin looks out the window with a concerned expression as he silently wonders about a haze he was looking for, but he tells Franz to alert him immediately if anything strange happens. They eventually arrive at a bustling area near the large city gate where the rain has stopped and a crowd of soaking wet adventurers and children are gathering. Severin suddenly narrows his eyes as he notices something peculiar outside the window and realizes there are strange children who seem to be physically connected to their carriage. He watches in shock as the mysterious children begin moving directly toward them just before the carriage comes to a violent and abrupt halt that throws the passengers forward. Severin instinctively wraps his arms around Franz to protect him from the impact while Franz looks pale and terrified as he asks if they have run someone over. The driver hurriedly explains that some children crossed in front of the carriage but they were not hit or captured, and he sincerely apologizes for the sudden stop. Severin calmly tells the driver that there is no need to rebuke the children since they are young and no harm was done, while Franz sighs with immense relief that everyone is safe. As the carriage settles, Franz looks out the window and notices that the mysterious string that had been attached to the carriage is now gone, and he wonders if those children were actually ghosts. His attention is quickly drawn to a beautiful sight outside, and he excitedly calls for his brother to look at the amazing view now that the danger has passed. Franz, who is excited that the translation of the manga series is continuing so he can keep reading. He looks adorable and happy while acknowledging the work done by the translation team on the typesetting and chapters. After surviving a chaotic journey involving a black rabbit and a near accident on the way home, Franz and his companions safely arrive at the imperial capital. Franz immediately returns to his daily routine of studying starting that very day. His teacher, a dark-haired man who remains expressionless, begins giving him compliments and feedback on his work. While the teacher keeps a straight face, Franz reacts with cute, happy noises as he receives the praise. Franz notices that his stoic teacher seems to enjoy sweet things, as the man makes a face suggesting he finds the cake delicious. Remembering a past souvenir exchange that didn't go well, Franz eagerly decides to try again because he loves giving gifts. He presents a new souvenir that his grandfather helped him pick out, and he holds it up excitedly as it shines with a literal light. The teacher tells him to go ahead and open the box, which Franz believes is a magic iron box made of illusion elm wood with an excellent design. However, as the teacher stares at the open box, he sees a giant cicada's empty shell inside, which is pixelated in the image, leaving him to awkwardly thank the beaming child. The box actually contains thinly sliced bread that has been dried and baked again with sweets and jam inside. Franz urges his teacher to try a bite of the unique treat that looks like stained glass. They whisper quietly to each other as the teacher samples the food. Sitting at a garden table with tea, the teacher finds the treat delicious because it tastes like a biscuit with a distinct flavor, and he also enjoys the lemon version. Franz explains that once the sweets are finished, the beautiful box can be used to store items like magic stones. Franz laughs to himself and thinks he is very smart because this explanation allows him to cover up his secret about Triskun. He figures that if he accidentally mentions the chair or the secret, he can just claim he heard it from his teacher. He then casually asks his teacher how things are going at the castle. The teacher explains that the emperor is aware that actions were taken to seal the Demon King away and is now creating a Demon King task force to handle the situation. He reveals that since he was there to cover it up and Arthur had divine protection, they managed the situation, but the new task force will consist of people who can sense the Demon King's power. Franz listens intently and wonders if this specific scenario regarding the task force was ever in the game he knows. Taking a sip of tea, the teacher admits that even elite units might not detect the sinister magic, as even he couldn't sense it lurking there immediately. Because he feels unsafe after seeing the black unicorn rabbit, the teacher has decided to raise Arthur to become a true hero since Arthur possesses more magic power than most people. Franz realizes that Arthur is now the teacher's disciple, and the teacher confirms that he has guaranteed the commoner boy a place as his student at the castle's magic academy. As Franz looks at his teacher, he thinks about how cool the man is and realizes he resembles the sage from the game who has long black hair, wears dark clothes, and is silent and expressionless. Franz begins to connect the dots, thinking that if his teacher is the super strong sage from the game, then he really is the ultimate hero. He wonders specifically if his teacher could truly be that legendary character. The teacher then suggests that it would be good for Franz to attend classes at the castle as well, which would make him Arthur's senior apprentice. However, Franz hears the Japanese word for senior apprentice and only understands the brother part of the word, leading him to mistakenly believe he is going to become Arthur's big brother. The teacher clarifies that since Franz was the first student, he is the senior, but Franz is too caught up in his misunderstanding. Franz stammers a yes, and fully embraces the idea of being a big brother, vowing to do his best in this new role. The story ends with Franz looking extremely energetic and happy as he shouts about being a big brother, completely misunderstanding his actual position as a senior student. A cheerful blonde boy walks alongside his taller dark-haired friend Tries while expressing his excitement about sneaking out for the first time since his birthday. Tries smiles and teases his junior friend about being in such a good mood as they discuss their future studies together and the fact that the younger boy will soon be his fellow disciple. Their conversation shifts to a serious tone as Tries recalls a heavy downpour that happened recently and asks if the boy was okay during the bad weather. He explains that while the temperature was high and someone caught a cold, it quickly passed thanks to some unexpected help from outside. The blonde boy listens intently as Tries describes a pair of well-dressed twins who surprisingly brought medicine to the slums despite not looking like locals or nobles. Hearing this description triggers a realization in the blonde boy who suspects these mysterious figures might be important and immediately decides he must go to the slums to find them. He ignores the concerned look on Tries' face, which indicates that the older boy clearly does not want him wandering into such a dangerous area. Determined to travel quickly, the blonde boy starts digging through his belongings to find a way to pay for a ride while Tries watches with a confused expression. He comically ignores Tries' logical suggestion to use his family's private carriage because he wants to experience paying for a public ride like a commoner or escaping villain from a story. The boy shockingly pulls out a massive sparkling gem from his bag, which causes Tries to panic and loudly scold him for showing such a valuable item in public. Tries orders him to hide the jewel immediately and offers to pay for the carriage fee himself to avoid the driver freaking out over a gemstone payment that could buy a trip around the world. The two friends arrive at a nondescript grassy area by the road, which Tries explains is the stop for the horse-drawn carriage even though there are no signs. Tries instructs the small boy to stand by the road and show a strong intention to ride so the driver will know to stop for them. Taking this advice very seriously, the hooded boy steps forward and opens his eyes wide to project his intense desire to board the vehicle. He trembles with effort as he stares down the road and mentally wills the transport to halt until a carriage actually pulls over for them with a sudden stop. Tries chuckles at the boy's overly serious attempt as they climb into the crowded wooden vehicle and warns his young friend to hold onto his luggage tightly because of potential pickpockets. Inside the swaying carriage, Tries pulls out a handkerchief containing sweet dried bread called rusk to share with his friend. He explains that these treats have a long shelf life and offers the prettiest pieces to the blonde boy as a souvenir of their trip. The boy happily accepts the snack while enjoying the breeze coming through the open carriage window and remarks on how nice the wind feels. Suddenly the atmosphere changes as Tries notices a hand swiftly reaching out from behind him, and he quickly tells the blonde boy to grab onto something else for safety. The scene reveals two horned boys sitting directly behind them as one of the twins grins mischievously while holding onto Tries and claims he saw everything that just happened. The blonde boy looks on in surprise and realizes that these horned passengers are likely the mysterious twins they were discussing earlier, who look exactly alike except for their personalities, as one is described as a lively kid named Venven while the other is a quiet kid named Coyote. Venven cheerfully introduces himself while pointing to his identical twin brother Kyodel as the scene shifts slightly back in time to show a younger version of the main character interacting with them. In this flashback, the twins are holding two identical items and they mischievously ask the young boy which one belongs to him because he dropped it. The twins hold the items out side by side and push them toward the boy while challenging him to identify his property since the objects look so similar. The young boy looks closely at the items with a troubled expression because he genuinely cannot tell them apart at first glance due to their identical appearance. He eventually spots a small scratch he made accidentally on one of them and points it out to solve their little puzzle. The boy clutches his chest in relief as the tension fades and the twins congratulate him for being honest and observant. They thank him for playing along and call him a good boy before the scene transitions back to the present day where the older Franz is talking to the twins again. Franz stands with a small hooded child named Parfait while the twins explain that they remember him because he saved them in the past. The twins express their gratitude by mentioning that they know who he is even though they refer to him as the noble whose name cannot be said aloud. Parfait looks confused and tries to guess the name with silly suggestions like Framagon or Parfaire while Franz thinks Framagon actually sounds like a cool dragon species. Franz looks puzzled and tells them he does not recall doing anything heroic to save them while Parfait looks up at him with wide, curious eyes. The group decides to continue their conversation in a more comfortable spot so they head to a nearby park to chat. Franz asks Venven what they should do now while Parfait seems excited to hear the story of how they met. They arrive at the park and Franz tells the quiet twin Kyodel to look after Venven and Parfait while he goes to buy some bread for everyone. Kyodel agrees nervously while Venven comments that it has been a while since he visited a park and wonders if nobles usually come to such common places. Venven teasingly points out that Franz should not be there since he is from a high-ranking ducal family, but Franz ignores the tease and heads off to the bakery. While Franz walks away, he thinks about how well-informed Kyodel seems to be about his background and status. Back at the bench, the two lively children are distracted by birds while Kyodel sits silently and stares intensely at Franz with a serious expression. Franz notices the intense gaze and asks Kyodel why he is staring so hard, which prompts the quiet boy to start speaking about Franz's abilities. Kyodel explains that he knows Franz can make anything and is knowledgeable enough to find a way to live independently in the imperial capital. He continues to praise Franz and mentions that he also knows Franz's brother is amazing and that Franz was requested to perform a specific mission. Franz is startled that the boy knows so much about his private family matters and realizes Kyodel deduced his identity just from hearing him speak earlier. Kyodel admits that he overheard Franz murmuring about the noble whose name cannot be said aloud and pieced the information together. Franz tries to deflect the situation by suggesting that perhaps they have the wrong person because he really does not remember saving them. He looks down at the small hooded Parfait and feels a pang of guilt for not remembering such a significant event in these children's lives. The twins clarify the situation by explaining that he saved them by cutting their slave chains using a carriage. Franz blinks in pure surprise and confusion because he never intentionally used a carriage to cut chains. The twins insist that it was indeed Franz who freed them and they are certain of it. Franz tries to make sense of their story and starts piecing together his memories of a carriage ride. He realizes they are talking about the Triena family carriage and remembers a rainy day when he was riding with his brother Severin. A flashback image shows two small children dashing recklessly in front of the moving carriage on that rainy day. Franz confirms that he was indeed riding in the carriage that day and realizes the accident the twins are describing actually happened. The twins celebrate that he finally remembers while Franz internally notes that the slave rope they mentioned was actually held together by magic. He deduces that the carriage must have severed the magic flow sustaining the chains which freed the boys by accident. Franz asks them if they can see magic since they knew the chains broke and mentions a black rabbit in the forest to test their vision. He looks closely at their foreheads and notices small bumps that look like horns hidden under their hair. The twins admit they cannot see the black entity he mentioned but confirm they can sense magic because of their non-human heritage. They reveal that they are actually dragonauts or dragonkin and mention that they were almost sold for a high price because their species is so rare. Franz suddenly remembers something from the game he knows and realizes that twin dragonauts were powerful characters in the original story. He screams internally as he realizes he has triggered a new event flag involving these extremely strong characters and worries about what this means for his future. Franz deep in thought as he compares the twins standing before him to the characters he remembers from the original game. He recalls that the original twin dragonauts were extremely strong characters with large horns and wings, but he realizes the children in front of him look slightly different. Franz notices that Venvin and Kyodel are younger than the game versions and each possesses a broken horn on opposite sides of their heads, which makes him suspect they went through a traumatic experience when they were sold off. He suddenly snaps back to reality and rushes toward the group while apologizing for being late because he was delayed by a peddler who only visits the capital once every 6 months. A small hooded child waits impatiently with a scrunched face and groans in frustration from hunger until Franz finally arrives. The child leaps into the air with relief and shouts for tries before landing securely in Franz's arms while the twins confirm they are fine. Franz holds the child close and worries internally that he has tampered with the laws of the universe and failed to manage the event flags properly by saving them. The group settles down on a park bench to eat the bread Franz bought because he believes that hunger ruins a person's mood. He playfully speaks in a formal tone while offering the food and asks if they would do the honor of partaking in it. The small hooded child sniffs the scent of wheat from the bread while one of the twins eyes a round bun and asks if it is okay for him to eat it. Franz gently pets the hooded child's head to comfort him while the child tears a piece of bread and thanks him with a happy blush. He then hands a large meat bun to the twins and tells them to make sure they eat some meat while the hooded child offers Franz half of his own bread in return. While they eat, the twins ask Franz what he bought from the peddler, so he shows them a plant called the spider-leg geranium. He explains that it is the cheapest medicine available for treating scrapes or minor burns and thinks to himself that it might be useful if he ends up on a villain route. Suddenly the group senses something approaching and they react instinctively just before a man crashes into Franz while trying to pickpocket him. The thief mocks Franz for being naive but is shocked to discover that the item he stole is actually a fake. Franz looks confused until the twins reveal that Venvin is a genius at swapping items and Kyodel is a genius at crafting identical replicas. Kyodel explains that he made the fake item because he liked the bold and delicate design from the Nost country of Kaldanda and wanted to try recreating it. The twins admit they trailed the man for 3 days and waited until he stole the fake item just to satisfy their curiosity. Franz looks at them with a stern expression and lectures them about messing with people out of pure curiosity. He asks Kyodel how he would feel if Venvin was kidnapped and replaced by a lookalike, and then asks Venvin how he would feel if Kyodel was taken away to a rich person's house. The twins react with terrifying expressions and declare they would melt or eat anyone who tried to separate them. They quickly agree to stop their reckless behavior because they know their new boss hates unreasonable things. Franz decides to accept them despite their dark nature and acknowledges that they are still good kids at heart. Later the group walks through the city and notices a group of priests and adventurers stumbling around looking like zombies. Franz realizes they have been hit by a curse attack as the victims make slithering and groaning sounds that disgust the twins. They enter the church where the scene feels like extreme horror with the cursed people gobbling and groaning in pain. Franz uses this moment to teach a lesson to his wolf plush toy by explaining that curse attacks are healed at the church while scratches are treated with spider-leg geraniums. The story concludes in Franz's bedroom where he lies in bed cuddling his wolf plush and mentally repeating the information he learned. He notes that he has to memorize the details because he would be in trouble if the maids saw him writing them down. Franz closes his eyes with a smile and feels satisfied that he has grown slightly more knowledgeable today before drifting off to sleep. Franz swinging back and forth on a swing that feels incredibly high to him as he notes it is even taller than his father. He notices the swing is attached to something iron-like rather than just being tied up, but as he enjoys the moment his grip slips and he suddenly falls from the seat. His big brother Severin immediately dashes to the scene in a panic, calling out his name and asking if he is hurt while frantically offering a potion. Franz has a small bump on his head labeled with a sound effect, but he cheerfully welcomes his brother back and insists he is alright. Severin anxiously asks if Franz wants to use a chest potion or if he is in pain, but Franz just giggles sweetly and thanks him for the concern. Severin sighs with relief as he observes that the swing is low and the grass provided a soft landing, though he admits he was terrified because he saw Franz fall on his head. Franz apologizes for worrying him and quickly tries to take the blame by claiming he fell off the swing on purpose because he got carried away. He desperately wants to protect the maids and servants from being blamed for a lack of supervision because he fears they might get fired for his accident. Drawing on memories from his past life, Franz knows the harsh reality of noble households, so he stammers while telling his brother that being a good kid involves more than just obedience. He insists that his fall was due to his own carelessness in doing something weird and not the fault of the staff's supervision. Severin listens to his brother's plea and promises that no one will be punished for the incident. While Severin thinks his little brother is pure and kind for protecting the servants, Franz is internally relieved that nobody will lose their job over his clumsy mistake. The scene shifts to a relaxing tea time where Franz enjoys snacks with Severin, who reveals he is on a break from his duties until the day after tomorrow. They enjoy Severin's favorite tea as the older brother brings up the topic of the unicorn rabbit in the forest that Franz had been worried about. Severin explains that their father sent soldiers from the castle to search the forest for 2 days, but they could not find any suspicious creatures. Franz asks about the black haze unicorn rabbit he saw on the way to his grandfather's house, and Severin confirms that curses do exist in nature. Severin suggests that monsters might heal naturally or be exorcised by priests, so the creature likely got better or moved on. Franz internally compares this to his game knowledge where monsters could use a curse effect and wonders if the black haze on the Emperor's chair was a different type of magic. The conversation takes a serious turn when Severin mentions that the saint has officially joined the church, which causes Franz to panic internally because this event is happening too early. Franz worries that his attempts to be a good boy might have altered the timeline because in the original game the saint only appears around age 15. He fears that if she starts building power this early, she will become an invincible and terrifying full-power saint by the time she reaches that age, which he considers overkill. Despite his internal fears, he raises his fist in a small victory pose because he realizes the official unveiling is still a while away. Severin notices Franz's distress and admits he does not fully understand but promises to always be there to help him if he is in trouble. He gently tells Franz that he should not worry too much all alone. The chapter ends with a heartwarming moment as Franz hugs his brother tightly while thinking that although the saint is scary, his brother's reassurance is the best thing in the world.